Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if baby Naruto was kidnapped from Konoha and came back after 13 years later, Naruto x Ino, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Fox Sannin, link is in the description, also subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. Naruto ran, as fast as he could. The trees were blurs, as his legs carried him through the forest at untold speed. He ignored the pain in his side as he tried to make it to a good hiding spot before he was caught. He glanced over his shoulder to try and catch a glimpse of his pursuer, but all he could see was the verdant greens and browns of the forest. Feeling that he was safe for the moment, he stopped on a branch to catch his breath. Looking down at himself, he saw that he was covered in sweat, blood, and dirt. His shirt was missing and his pants had large holes in them. He sighed. He'd have to go shopping again. Standing back up, he prepared to start running again when he heard rustling behind him. He spun in time to see his predator crash into him, sending them hurtling off the branch to crash into the forest floor below. Blinking away the daze from the crash, he tried to get up, only to find a weight straddling him, pinning him to the ground, and a silky laugh ringing in his ears. "Caught you, Naru-chan," purred Anko as she slid a sharp kunai from her coat. Naruto whimpered. It had been 1 month ago that Naruto was first brought to Konoha, and 3 weeks since he began training. He'd been progressing well. He'd learned 2 new Meijin, Jabakusatsu no, and Kaiten. Housenkan no, his form in capoeira was coming along nicely, as was his training with his knives, and his stealth was getting there. Rin had him read up on the human body, as she wanted him to be completely aware of what was possible for the human body before she taught him medicine. He didn't mind, he liked reading. Currently Naruto lay in his bed moaning pathetically with Rin fussing over him and Kurenai scolding Anko. "How many times do I have to tell you not to go overboard? He's fine. He came back in one piece, didn't he? You had to carry him back after he passed out from blood loss. You worry too much about Kurenai." Kurenai just threw up her hand in exasperation and moved to the bed where Rin had just finished giving Naruto a checkup. "How is he?" she asked the medic. "He'll live, just a little tired." "See? Told ya," Anko chirruped. Kurenai glared at her fishnet-clad friend and moved into the living room, Rin and Anko following behind. She made them some tea and they sat on the couch in silence before Rin spoke up. "Sarutobi-sama says he needs to tell the council about Naruto-kun." Kurenai sighed. "I know. He said he wants you and me there when he presents the files we found to the council. How do you think it'll go?" Kurenai sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Well, I doubt the Ino Shikacho families will be a problem, as they have spent time with Naruto and they were friends of Minato. The Inyazukas would most likely accept him, but their loyalty will be absolute when he proves himself to the village. The Abiram would be highly logical and reserve judgment. I don't know about the Hyugas, but Hiashi was a good friend of Minato's when he beat that fake crap out of his head. It'll be the civilians that will try to stir things up though." Anko snorted. "Let him say what they want, civilians don't get a choice in things like this." "Still, they could cause some animosity towards Naruto-kun," Rin commented. "Wouldn't really matter if they did. Ninja and civilians don't exactly run in the same circles." "Yeah, but it is the civilians that run most of the stores. They could make life difficult for him." Kurenai scowled into her cup. "Well," Anko supplied. "We'll cross that shit creek when we come to it." The others chuckled lightly at the typical Anko response. The sound of blades clashing rang throughout the clearing. The combatants stood in the center trading blows. The taller of the two was always centered and never moved. The shorter one was in constant movement, spinning, slashing, and flipping trying to land a blow. The short one brought his blade swinging up in a vertical arc only to be blocked. The kick was directed at his side, but he flipped sideways over it, only to see a reverse kick coming straight for his face. He braced his hands flat on the ground behind him as he tried to duck backwards under the attack, only to collapse to the ground with a cry of pain. The taller one looked down at him with slight concern. "You okay, Naruto?" Asuma asked as he helped his part-time student to his feet. "Yeah." He groaned as he got up. "What happened?" Naruto sighed. "It's the knives. Every time I try to brace my hands on the ground they get in the way or bend my fingers painfully." He looked at his knuckles where the trench knives had dug into them when he pressed his palms to the ground. Apparently capoeira and knife fighting didn't mix well sometimes. Asuma sighed as he ran a hand through his short beard and thought. They had been trying to blend Naruto's knives with his taijutsu, but it was slow going. Some of the moves required the hands to be pressed against the ground to give the user leverage to help perform flips and cartwheels. He groaned. Now they had to go and see Guy. Not that he didn't like Guy, but he was a lot to handle sometimes. Oh well. Naruto was one of the few who recognized the utter coolness of trench knives, and if he had to deal with Guy to pass on his art, then so be it. They made their way out of the Sarutobi family gardens and out the front gate of the compound. As they made their way into the market district, Naruto noticed something. Some of the villagers were giving him dirty looks and muttering about him. Thankfully those looks were few and far between. They had started about 2 weeks prior. He'd asked Kurenai about it, but she just told him to ignore it, so he did. Asuma also saw the looks. He'd been told by his father that the council had to be informed of the recent developments, and it went surprisingly well. Apparently Naruto being away all those years helped people move on, and only 2 or 3 people on the council still bore a grudge against him. When the general population was informed it was the same, the majority was neutral, but there were some who couldn't escape the past and blamed the boy for the tragedy. Naruto's life wouldn't be in any danger or change in any dramatic way, so there was no problem. The few who glared at the kid got a healthy dose of killing intent, courtesy of Asuma. When they reached Team Guy's training ground, they entered the clearing in time to see Neji send Lee sprawling into the ground. "I have told you before, Lee, fate has decreed that you will always lose," the Hyuga prodigy said as the green-clad teen struggled to get up. Naruto frowned. He got on well with everybody on the team except Neji. He just couldn't stand his way of attributing everything to fate. His shitty attitude was another reason. Lee and Tenten were the closest things he could claim as friends, and he didn't like the way Neji always degraded them. In fact, sometimes he wanted to send the young Hyuga through the nearest tree. Asuma called as he lit another cigarette. The spandex nin turned at the call and smiled widely at the approaching duo. "Good morning, Asuma-san. I hope you are well this fine day." Asuma shrugged. "As well as a smoker can be. We came because we need your help." They explained the problem with the knives to Guy. Guy looked thoughtful and asked Naruto to give a demonstration. Naruto obliged and went through a few exercises with his knives and capoeira when the same happened. Guy thought for a moment before inspiration struck. He took the knives and told Asuma and Naruto to watch closely as he mixed the fighting style and knife fighting together. It took Naruto a moment to realize something. "You're not using your hands." I nodded. "Yes, it appears that you could still fight with the knives and utilize your taijutsu if you don't use your hands for the flips. If you do handless flips and use more rolls and sweeps or use your elbows and forearms when you need to brace yourself against the ground, you should be able to incorporate your knives into your fighting style. If you refine and master it, you will have created a new branch of capoeira." Asuma chuckled. "Hear that, kid, you've already created your own style. So what would you call it?" Naruto thought about it for a moment before he smiled. "Capoeira aerial." "You're going great, Naruto-kun," Rin said as Naruto tried to heal the fish lying on the table in front of him. They were in a spare room of the hospital where Naruto was currently trying to cure a fish of a deadly case of scale rot by using Shaosen no, the most basic medical. Naruto commented that he seemed to heal fast enough without medicine, which he discovered when he was training with Anko, but Rin was adamant, saying that even if he didn't need it, someone on his team could, so he just tried his best to learn He'd been just starting to learn about using medicine in the offensive, using chakra scalpels and poisons to bring down the enemy, and he did rather well as it was easy to remember where all the critical points were. Rin had noticed this too, but she just attributed it to Fox's latent knowledge. Naruto saw that the sail rot was starting to recede slowly, so he pushed more chakra into the technique. When the infection completely disappeared but the fish didn't move, Naruto thought he had failed, but that thought was dashed as the fish started to wriggle, gasping for air. Rin smiled as she picked it up and dropped it into the empty tank beside her. "That was excellent, Naruto-kun. You're really coming along well." Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly and smiled slyly. "Thanks, Rin-ni-chan." Rin smiled at the endearment. After all the time they had spent together, Naruto had started calling her Kurenai and even Anko his ni-chans. They didn't mind and even enjoyed it. They knew that Naruto often wondered about his family as they saw him staring at parents with their children when he thought they weren't looking. It was heartbreaking. He had never known any sense of family or friendship before they rescued him from that base, and now that he saw it he wanted it, but just didn't know how to go about getting it. They just had to be the best substitutes they could be for him. "Well," she said as she wiped her hands. "Now that we're done here, how about we go get us some ramen?" Naruto looked at her quizzically. "What's ramen?" Rin just looked at him in shock for a moment before looping an arm around his shoulder with a huge grin and leading him out the door. "I have much to teach you, young." Naruto sat against a tree in the Sarutobi Gardens. The Hokage had invited him and Kurenai over for dinner in the evening, and Naruto decided that he would read up on some while he waited. He loved the gardens at the Sarutobi compound and was welcomed there anytime. The Hokage's wife had also taken a shine to him and also started calling him Naru-chan. He blamed Anko for that. Currently he was reading up on a variation of the Bunshin no called Rai Bunshin no, which created a solid clone of the user that when destroyed would revert back into its natural lightning element and shock the attacker. He really couldn't wait till he tried it out, but Rin-ni-chan said that he could only perform Raiden when she was there, as it could affect his body's electrical current. His thoughts were interrupted as he saw something trying to sneak up on him. Trying is the operative word. Who wouldn't notice a square rock with eye holes inching towards them in plain sight? He sighed. Come on out, Konohamaru, I know you're there. The rock exploded in a cloud of smoke, and from it emerged a coughing 10-year-old boy wearing a helmet and a long blue scarf. The boy choked and spluttered for a moment, muttering "used too much powder" before his gaze settled on a slightly exasperated Naruto. I should have expected you to see through my disguise, rival. Naruto groaned mentally. He didn't mind the kid, but Konohamaru had taken to following him everywhere he went, and it was bordering on stalking. Ever since he saw Naruto land a pretty strong hit on Asuma in training, he had pestered him non-stop to teach him. What do you want, Konohamaru? You know what I want, you need to teach me so I can defeat Jiji and become Hokage. Naruto groaned at that. Now he wouldn't leave him alone until he was taught something he thought he could use against the old man. Naruto was just about to explain again that he couldn't teach the boy anything when a thought occurred to him. Slowly a very evil grin crawled across his face, and Konohamaru couldn't help but feel a little scared. Suddenly Naruto grabbed a piece of spare paper from the book and began to jot down notes as his mind replayed a memory from a few days prior. Flashback no. Naruto was walking through the corridors of the Hokage Tower on his way to see the Sandaime. During his time in the village he had become quite close to the old leader and thought him something of a surrogate grandfather. It didn't hurt that the old man had often offered to buy him ramen after Rin had introduced him to the sweet fatty piece of heaven. Walking up to the door he noticed that it was slightly ajar, so he just walked in. He saw Sandaime sitting in his chair facing the window with a small orange book in his hands and a rather strange blush on his face. His curiosity piqued, he walked up to the desk and tried to see what was in the book, but the Hokage was blocking it. Hey Sarutobi Jiji, what are you reading? The Hokage shot out of his chair and spun in the air, trying to see who had snuck up on him. His eyes landed on Naruto, who was confused as to why the strongest ninja in the village was suddenly sweating bullets. Naruto, what are you doing here? Don't you remember, you said we were going out for ramen today. Sarutobi sighed in relief. What's in the book, Jiji? He started sweating again. He was about to try and bluff his way out of it when the door opened to admit Anko. Hey old man, got any good Miss Dot? She broke off upon seeing the book clutched in Sandaime's hands. Sarutobi-sama, whose book is that? She asked with a sickly sweet voice, a creepy smile gracing her features. What do I do? What do I do? Okay, calm down. There has got to be a way out of this. I could the boy. Sorry about this Naruto, you'll understand one day. Actually Anko, I just confiscated this book from Naruto. I believe that he has been spending too much time with Kakashi and has begun to pick up his bad habits. The Hokage said in his most believable voice. Anko rounded on a confused Naruto, the creepy smile on her face got even creepier. Aw, so Naru-chan likes reading little orange books, eh? Well, we'll just have to fix that, won't we? Or rather, fix him. She gripped the back of his shirt and began to grab him out of the office. Come on Naru-chan, we have training. She said in a sing-song voice. Naruto knew that voice and usually associated it with pain. As he was dragged out he glared at the Hokage with a mix of anger, hurt and betrayal. The old traitor wouldn't meet his gaze. Naruto spent the next 4 hours training with Anko, which was basically her kicking his ass up and down the training field for 4 hours. He spent the next 2 days in his bed for recovery, being lectured the whole time from Kurenai and Rin about not being a pervert despite his protests that he wasn't one. Kakashi and Asuma didn't help any, as they kept asking him what he thought of the book and if he had read any others. He swore revenge on the old man. Flashback and no. And now he was getting that revenge with interest. As he looked over his notes one last time he let out a chuckle that was malice incarnate. He jumped to his feet and pointed to Konohamaru. Konohamaru. Are you ready to learn that will guarantee that you will defeat your grandfather? Konohamaru had stars in his eyes as he nodded his head vigorously. Okay then, I want you to do exactly as I tell you. Sarutobi walked out the back of the estate and into the gardens to fetch his 2 grandsons for dinner. He felt bad for what he had done to Naruto, but he didn't really have any choice. Anko was one of the worst pervert bashers in the village. Naruto would understand one day. Right. He found the 2 in the far corner of the gardens. Konohamaru was covered in dirt and sweat while Naruto stood by watching him with pride. Konohamaru looked up as his grandfather approached and smiled. This would be the day he defeated him. The young boy leaped to his feet, all previous signs of exhaustion gone, and looked at Sarutobi with determination. The day is the day that you're going down, old man. Sarutobi sighed. An author attack by his young grandson. This was the 6th time this week. And it was only Tuesday. Konohamaru, must you keep doing this? Ah, the old goat knows his time is at an end and is begging for mercy. Too bad. Wark no jutsu. The name should have been warning enough, but Sarutobi was too distracted to care. From the cloud of smoke emerged a very sensuous, very beautiful, very naked young woman. She had luscious curves and legs that went on forever. Her eyes shone from under her long brown hair as she winked at him. Stop staring at Hokage-sama, I'm shy. She whined cutely. Sarutobi stared for all of 3 seconds before he was launched backwards in a crimson arc of blood gushing from his nose. As he lay on the ground twitching, Konohamaru released and started to run around, proclaiming that he finally defeated the old man, while Naruto was rolling around howling his sides out in laughter. Yo, you just got your ass handed to you, Jiji, courtesy of Koru-chan. Naruto managed to get out between bursts of laughter. That'll teach you to blame your perverted little habits on me. Sarutobi crawled to his feet with 2 bloody tissues stuffed up his nose. He couldn't deny that he deserved it, but that didn't mean he had to like it either. Reminding himself to outlaw that, he beckoned a smiling Konohamaru and a still laughing Naruto to follow him for dinner. Ino sat at the counter of her family's flower shop in a daze. School had let out for the weekend and she was forced to stay indoors and work in the shop. It was a slow day, so Ino did the one thing she could do, fantasize. Currently, in her head, she was in a field with Sasuke kissing tenderly in the high grass. He had just confessed his undying love for her and said that he could never love forehead girl, as he so romantically put it. The scene changed and she was in the middle of a crowd of girls, all of whom were giving up on Sasuke, saying that they could never compete with her beauty and grace. The scene changed again and she found herself beside a small waterfall watching as a man bathed under the pounding water dripping off his muscular frame and his spiky blonde hair framing his deep blue eyes. Wait, blonde. Hey pig. Ino jumped as she was brought out of her reverie, wiping the tiniest hint of blood from her nose. She looked up and saw her former friend rival Ino and Sakura enter the store, clad in her usual red dress, with her long pink hair spilling down her back. What do you want, forehead? Ino asked. Sakura produced a note. My mom sent me to pick up an order. Ino took the note and began to pick out the items. As she did that, Sakura sat on the edge of the counter. So pig, the genin exam is just 2 months away. Are you gonna quit yet and admit that I'm the better kunoichi destined for Sasuke-kun's heart? Ha! In your dreams, billboard brow. Sasuke-kun will be mine and you will have to settle for someone like Kiba or Shino. Ino laughed as she placed a flower arrangement on the counter. Sakura shivered. I wouldn't wish Kiba on anyone, even you, and that Shino guy is just plain creepy. I know. As Ino picked up a rather large potted plant, she heard the door ringing. She tried to turn to see who the new customer was, but her foot tangled in some loose vines and she lost her balance. She closed her eyes and braced for impact and the sound of smashing pottery, but it never came. She felt an arm wrap around her waist breaking her fall and she was pulled against something warm and soft but firm. Are you okay, Ino? She knew that voice. Her eyes snapped open and she found herself face to face with Uzumaki Naruto. Or rather face to chest, as she was currently cradled against him, one arm around her waist and another holding the heavy plant pot with ease. She blinked and a bright blush spread across her face. Ino? Are you alright? Sakura asked worriedly as she hopped off the counter. Yeah, I'm fine. Ino mumbled, still not taking her eyes off those of the tall blonde who was looking over her with worry. Ino? She snapped out of her stupor as Naruto set her back on her feet, leaving her slightly disappointed. I swear, Ino, you can be such a klutz. Sakura said as she gave her friend again for the moment one last look over. Ino rounded on Sakura. Shut it, forehead. I'd like to see you try to walk while carrying a heavy pot. Well, at least I wouldn't fall all over the place like some cartoon character. What did you say? Naruto looked back and forth between the two as the verbal sparring continued and wondered if it would be rude to interrupt. Luckily, he was saved by the arrival of Ino's mother, Yasu. Oh, Naruto-kun. What brings you here? She asked as she walked into the front of the store from the back room. Naruto gave one last glance to the bickering girls before he stepped around them and placed the pot on the counter. Kurenai-ni-chan sent me to pick up a special order. Ah, those special seeds from Demon Country. I have them right here. She reached under the counter and produced a small packet of seeds before handing them over to Naruto. Tell her to remember only to water them with chakra-enhanced water. I will. Oh. And if you're both not doing anything tonight, we'd love to have you over for dinner tonight. I'll tell her. He said as he walked to the door. He looked at the girls who had stopped arguing to catch some air and he waved to Ino. Later, Ino. She waved back. Bye, Naruto. And thanks for helping me. He walked out the door and down the street, not noticing Ino's eyes on his back as he left her line of sight. Who was that pig? Sakura asked as the strange boy left. That was Naruto, he just moved here a few months ago. Oh, so he's a civilian. Ino shook her head. No, he's studying for this year's genin exam. What? But it's in 2 months. Ino walked back around the counter. He says he's a quick learner. Huh. So how do you know him? Sakura asked as she started to gather up her purchases. You know Yuhi Kurenai is a friend of the family. Well, she's his legal guardian. What's he like? Sakura asked as she leaned on the counter. Ino queried an eyebrow. Why? She shrugged. Just wondering. Ino looked thoughtful. Well, he was really shy at first, but that's understandable since he's new to town. When he started to open up more, he was really funny and smart, and he always offers to help with stuff. My dad said he was being trained by some of the jounin, and when I took an order to Kurenai's place, I saw Naruto sparring with her in the training ground nearby. He was so cool and so fast, I could hardly see him move. Wow, said Sakura. Still, he can't be better than Sasuke-kun. Yeah, definitely. Naruto lay in his bed, as content as can be. He had no training scheduled today, and the genin exam wasn't until Monday, so for now he could just vegetate until that time without any interruptions. At least that was the plan before he was unceremoniously yanked from his bed by the ankle. Naruto groaned as he looked up at the person who deprived him of his me time to see a grinning Asuma standing over him. Naruto just groaned again and tried to crawl back into his bed. None of that squirt, we have to go. The bearded jounin said as he pulled the covers off the bed. Naruto sighed and looked up at him with bleary eyes. Why do I need to get up again? Because I'm taking you to get your new clothes today. And why did you need to get me up this early to go shopping? Asuma leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Well, we have to go before the girls get wind of it or they're going to try and take the whole thing over. You do remember what happened last time, don't you? Naruto paled. The last time Kurenai, Anko, and Rin had taken him for clothes was horrible. They spent hours going from store to store and trying different things on him, and they didn't even let him take a break in between. Some of the things they bought were things that even Mido guy wouldn't be caught wearing. Most notably a shirt. That was pink. And had flowers on it. Rin thought it was cute. Naruto was up and dressed in under 3 seconds, and a second and a half later he was dragging Asuma out of the apartment as quickly and as quietly as possible. Kurenai had caught up to them, much to Naruto's dismay, but Asuma made her promise not to try and doll the boy up. She agreed, and they were on their way. After much convincing of Kurenai and a bribe to buy her some exotic flower seeds, Asuma managed to convince her to let Naruto shop at Asuma's regular clothing store. For some reason she didn't think a store called the Bloody Rag would sell high-quality ninja clothing, but Asuma assured her that it was where all the male ninja bought their clothes. Naruto was left to his own devices as Asuma and Kurenai went off to look at other goods. He passed several racks but couldn't decide what he wanted. He'd never had an eye for what went with what, and he didn't want to look stupid, so he kept it simple. He picked out a dark blue, long-sleeved turtleneck and pants similar to what most konoha jounin wore. Underneath the turtleneck would be a fishnet shirt that came down to his mid-forearm, and the sleeves of the turtleneck would be rolled up to just below the elbow, which would allow him to use the 2 storage seals on his wrists. For his feet he decided to go for a pair of boot-like sandals with matte black shin guards. He still felt something was missing, so he looked around and was lucky enough to find a pretty cool vest. It was black and looked just like a regular Chunin vest minus the neck guard, and on either side of his lower back were 2 kunai pouches, pointing up and tilted at an angle, which would allow him to easily draw his kunai. He walked over to the counter to wait for Asuma and Kurenai when a thought occurred to him: where would he keep his trench knives? He thought about it for a moment before he turned to the store clerk. Excuse me? The clerk looked up from the order form he was filling in. Yes. I was wondering if you do custom work. The clerk nodded. Yes, for extra. Naruto pulled out the pants he picked up and said, I have a pair of trench knives, but no sheaths for them. Is it possible to attach a sheath to each leg of these pants? The clerk thought about it for a moment. Yes, I suppose I could stitch a sheath onto each thigh and cover them with the same material as the pants to make them blend in. Do you have your knives with you so I can get some measurements? Naruto bit his lip. Asuma had taken away his knives a few days ago. He said he had a surprise for him and he would get it after he graduated. He was about to tell the clerk such when a trench knife was dropped onto the counter. Naruto looked over his shoulder to see Asuma standing there. Take mine, it's roughly the same size. The clerk nodded and went off to do the measurements. He said they could pick the pants up that afternoon. Asuma ordered 3 more pairs of the turtlenecks and customized pants each, as one pair would get worn out quickly, and they left. They decided to spend the rest of the afternoon at a nice restaurant before going back to pick up the pants, then heading back to the apartment. Naruto was pretty beat, so he said his thanks and good nights before he crashed out on his bed. DRRR. 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 Smash. Naruto's smile was instantaneous when he woke up. It wasn't because he'd just killed his alarm, although that was a bonus. No, it was because today was the day of the genin exam. He leaped out of his bed and into the shower, quickly scrubbing himself off before he got dressed. He wouldn't be wearing his new clothes today, as he was saving them for when he was an actual genin, so he slipped on his white t-shirt with flame detailing and his black pants and sandals. After wrapping his full kunai pouch around his right thigh, he walked into the living room to see Kurenai sitting at the table sipping her tea and reading the paper. She smiled as she saw the huge grin on his face. Looks like someone is excited about his test today. You bet Ni-chan. I'm gonna kick so much ass today. He pumped his fist into the air. Kurenai chuckled as she set down her cup. He had been around Anko too much, he was starting to pick up her bad language. Well, sit down and eat. You can't do to the academy on an empty stomach. Naruto nodded and sat down to inhale his bacon and eggs. After a quick trip to the bathroom, he was at the door going over his equipment, Kurenai fussing over him the whole time. Do you have all your kunai? Yes. Did you store your shuriken into your wrist seals? Yes. Did you remember your underwear? Be Kurenai Ni-chan. Kurenai chuckled and was about to shoo him to the door when there was a knock at said door. Opening it, Kurenai came face to face with the Hokage. Hokage-sama, what brought you here? Sarutobi smiled. I came to escort Naruto to the academy. It's a big day and I wanted to wish him well. Thanks, old man. Naruto smiled from behind Kurenai. He rechecked everything one last time, then stepped out the door beside the Hokage. With a hug from Kurenai and a wish of good luck, the ninja leader and ninja hopeful started their trek to the academy. The whole way Naruto pestered the Hokage about the exam, what it would be like, what happens after it, what if he didn't pass, and a multitude of other questions which the Hokage answered with patience. Before too long they were in front of the academy building and Naruto felt a sudden wave of nerves. Sarutobi saw this and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Naruto smiled in gratitude before taking a breath and following the Hokage into the academy. Konoha Ninja Academy had been around since the beginning of Konoha. In the past, it was the responsibility of the clans to train their ninjas as part of Konoha's forces, but there was often many problems like the small amount of ninja each clan could produce every decade and the question of who the ninja answered to, the clan or the Hokage. To solve these problems, the Shadai constructed the academy. Since Konoha trained the ninjas, they would be loyal to the Hokage, and it also allowed the village to train non-clan shinobi to bolster the ranks. The academy, while not massive, was impressive. Housing over 150 different rooms, it was one of the larger structures of the village next to the hospitals and major clan houses. The classes were varied with subjects like the basic history, jutsu theory, endurance training, target practice, and geography, and the classes meant for those in the advanced years like combat training, tracking training, etiquette training, and strategy. Understandably, training ninja took a lot of work and not many were able to make the cut. This, however, didn't faze the young ninja hopefuls who worked hard every day for the chance to earn their forehead protectors. One ninja hopeful, a certain blonde, looked at the large building with rapture. This was the place he would finally become a shinobi after all those months of working himself into the ground. He was buzzing with anticipation of what was to come. He had already been told of what the exam would entail, a written test to gauge one's knowledge about the history of the village, the shinobi military structure, and the shinobi laws, an obstacle course followed by a target range, then onto the taijutsu exam, an exam finishing with an ninjutsu exam. It would be no problem. Following the Hokage, Naruto made his way through the large wooden doors and down one of the many hallways. The sound of hundreds of students in their studies floated along the halls. Making their way up a set of stairs, the duo walked for another few minutes before stopping outside a door marked exam room. Ready? Sarutobi asked, slightly amused by the nerves that the boy was beginning to show. Naruto took a deep breath and nodded. Sarutobi opened the door and was followed closely by Naruto. The class was like a mini amphitheater with 4 rows of tables facing the blackboard and a large window taking up an entire wall overlooking the Hokage monument and the village. At the front of the class stood their sensei. He was a tan chunin with a long scar across his nose and his black hair tied up into a ponytail. He looked up as the Hokage and a blonde boy entered. He stood to attention as the rest of the class went silent, all eyes on their leader. "Iruka, how are you?" Sarutobi asked as he strode up to the school teacher. "Fine, sir. It's a little stressful taking an entire graduating class by yourself, but I'm coping." Iruka smiled. "Yes, sorry about that, I would have gotten someone else to assist you, but they were busy." Haruka was forced to moderate the exam by himself after his teaching partner Mizuki was caught trying to steal a scroll from the Hokage tower. Apparently he was a minor root spy used by Danzo to keep an eye out for students with potential in the academy and give their names to Danzo. He was caught by Anbu and now faced execution in a few days. As the teacher and leader exchanged small talk, some of the class were discussing the blonde newcomer. "Hey pig, isn't that new guy I saw in your store?" Sakura whispered to the long-haired blonde beside her. "Yeah, Naruto," she confirmed. "Hey, you know that guy?" asked Inyazuka Kiba, a scruffy messy-haired teen in a fur-hooded coat with 2 red inverted triangles on each cheek. His Ninken Akamaru yawned and buried his face further into his master's hood. "Who is he?" Ino turned to him. "Like I told Forehead, his name's Uzumaki Naruto. He moved here a couple of months ago to train to be a ninja and has been studying for the exam. He's been training with a bunch of different jounin, so I guess he's probably really strong and he's really smart." "And be that smart? I mean, he's wearing a freaking dog collar around his neck." Kiba snickered. A human wearing a dog collar was very embarrassing in the Inyazuka clan. Ino frowned. Naruto was a nice guy and she didn't like the idea of Kiba making fun of him for no reason. Although she did wonder about that collar. "Shut a dog breath, if anyone should be wearing a dog collar around here it should be you." "Don't call me dog breath, Blondie." Kiba scowled. "What should I call you? Mutt? Mongrel? Flea farm?" Kiba was about to reply when Haruka cut him off. "Okay class, listen up. We have another student taking part in the exam, so I'd like you to welcome Uzumaki Naruto. The test will start in a few minutes, so get ready." Haruka pointed Naruto towards an empty seat next to Chaoji. The portly boy smiled and offered some chips which Naruto readily accepted. When the Hokage left, Haruka started to hand out the written test while listing the rules. Once everyone had their papers, they were told to begin. Naruto flipped his paper over and looked at the first question. Who was the first Hokage and what major contributions did he make to the village? Specify how the contributions affected the village and provide evidence to support your answer. Naruto thought for a moment before he started. The first Hokage, Shadai, was Senju Hashirama of the Senju clan. In addition to building the village using his Mokuton abilities, he drafted and put into place numerous laws such as the Act of Equal Human Rights. This would be easy. Naruto sat against a tree beside the target range. The first test had been a breeze and he easily answered all of the questions with no trouble. Spending the first 13 years of your life doing nothing but reading up on konoha would do that. After that they'd moved on to the obstacle course, which he'd managed to get through with the quickest time. Right now he was watching the other students taking turns throwing their kunai and shuriken at the dummies scattered around the field while Haruka charted their scores. He was a little surprised when many people showed only moderate skill with the weapons, only hitting 6 out of 10 targets for each weapon most of the time. Weren't final year students supposed to show skill? So far the only ones to show any aptitude were a girl with short blue hair and wide eyes, which he recognized as a Hyuga, and a boy with black hair and a blue turtleneck with white shorts. He was one of the last calls. So far no one had managed to hit all 10 targets. The first few were easy, then got progressively harder until you came to the 10th one, which was behind a tree which no one had figured out how to hit, but Naruto had a plan. He walked to the spot Haruka indicated and just stood there taking in all the facts like the air current, positions of the dummies, and their distance from him just like he had been taught. After a moment he pulled a kunai and held it to get the feel of it while the others watched with interest, wanting to see if the new kid was any good. Suddenly Naruto brought his arm up and with a quick flick sent the knife into the center of the first target. Without missing a beat he pulled another and scored another bullseye. The class were in awe. He was hitting every target in the exact center and he wasn't even pausing in between. He hit the first 9 targets in under 5 seconds and, almost lazily, threw a kunai past a tree that the final dummy was behind. The class thought that he just missed out on a perfect score when, with blinding quickness, he drew a final kunai and threw it with unwavering speed. It hit the first kunai on the ring, causing it to change direction with a resounding cling and strike the final target dead on. The class were silent as he swiped his hands across his wrists and, to their shock, produced 2 handfuls of shuriken in a burst of smoke. Before they could comment on this strange occurrence, he threw the shuriken with the same precision he did with the kunai, scoring 10 perfect hits again. As he collected his weapons, the class burst into whispers asking how he had managed to do that and how he got so good. As Haruka congratulated Naruto on his scores, the blonde failed to notice a pair of onyx black eyes staring at him intently. Who was this boy and how did he get such skills? The class files into one of the school dojo for their taijutsu exam. The objective was to meet the expected level of skill for a genin while you fought Haruka. As they were called out one by one, Naruto noticed that while most used the standard academy style, some used family or clan styles like the Hyuga's Gyuukin or the Akamichi's Juggernaut style, so he assumed it was okay to use capoeira. After Ino flopped down beside Choji covered in sweat, he moved to stand before Iruka. Okay Naruto, I know you haven't been around to learn the academy style, but the Hokage tells me you have your own. Naruto nodded. Well, warm up and let's get started. As Naruto stretched and readied his muscles for the spar, a group of students stood by, wondering if he would do well. I wonder what style he'll use. Ino wondered. Well, all the good ones are clan secrets, so he couldn't use one of those. It's probably just him making it up. Kiba concluded, hands in his pockets. Maybe it is his family style. Choji offered. Ino shook her head. He's an orphan, he couldn't have been taught a family style if there's no family. Maybe someone knew the style and taught it to him. You said he was raised by a family friend before he came to the village. Sakura reminded her. Well, if you are quiet and watch, maybe you'll find out. Shikamaru said as the two combatants readied themselves. Quite a few eyebrows were raised as Naruto dropped into the, swinging an arm across his chest defensively while bending low and moving from side to side and describing a triangle on the ground with his feet. Having never seen this particular form before, the students were curious as to what style it was. Iruka looked surprised but shook it off and moved to attack. He led with a punch for Naruto's face, which was easily batted aside, and, with more speed than Iruka would expect from an academy student, Naruto brought his right leg up for a kick to Chunin's head. Iruka jumped back and Naruto followed. He turned his back to the teacher and with grace flipped into a backwards kick which was blocked. Taking it in his stride, Naruto dropped to the ground and seemed to flow around Iruka's ankles to appear behind him and drive a hard elbow to the small of his back. As the Chunin stumbled forward, Naruto fell back into the and waited. He didn't have to wait long as Iruka came back at him with a kick to the chest. Naruto spun inside his guard and tried to sweep his legs out from under him, but he jumped over his leg and managed to kick him away. Naruto rolled with a kick and brought his heel up to clip Iruka's chin, sending him stumbling backwards. Naruto stood and flipped backwards, intending to bring his foot down on Chunin's head, but his ankle was caught and he was thrown across the mat, Iruka quickly following after. Again Naruto rolled with a kick and by the end he managed to bring himself into a handstand facing Iruka. He kicked his feet off the man's chest and spun on his hands to kick him in the knees, sending him to the ground. He tried to follow up with an axe kick to the sternum, but Iruka rolled out of the way and to his feet. Again Naruto waited. Iruka flew for him, intending to grab him and keep him stationary. Naruto's hand snapped out and caught the teacher's wrist in a firm grip, and he brought both feet up off the ground while pulling Iruka forward. The result was Naruto's feet smashing into the man's gut, driving the air from his lungs and dropping him to the ground gasping for breath. Naruto flipped back and into the and was about to attack when Iruka held up a hand. Stop. I think we've established that you have genin level skill in taijutsu. Hell, you may even be chunin level. Iruka wheezed with a smile at the end. His eyebrow twitched slightly when he noted that Naruto didn't even appear to be out of breath, his breathing the same as when they started. The boy smiled at the praise and starched the back of his head as he helped the man to his feet. The class was in shock. The moves he had been pulling off were done with such grace and fluidity, and he'd managed to fight Iruka to a standstill, even landing the blow that finished the fight. Kiba was the first to recover from his shock. What the hell? The feral boy exclaimed. How could he fight Iruka-sensei like that? He even won. Forget that, did you see how he moved? It was like he had no bones or something. Sakura said in a hushed voice. That was amazing. He even beat Iruka-sensei. Ino whispered in awe. Yeah, not even the Uchiha theme could do that. Kiba nodded. The insult to the object of their affections was all it took to bring the girls out of their reverie, and they set upon Kiba, pounding him into the ground. They only stopped when Naruto walked up to the group and the girls started bombarding him with questions, leaving Kiba bruised and bleeding on the ground, while Choji prodded him with his foot to see if he was still alive, while Shikamaru commented on how troublesome girls were. Naruto, what was that? Ino questioned, her curiosity palpable. What? He looked confused. That style. Sakura rushed him along. Oh, capoeira. He explained. What? Choji asked. He'd never heard of that before. It's the style Guy Sensei taught me. He would have explained more, but he was interrupted by the sight of someone walking over to them. He was a boy just a little shorter than him with black hair, wearing a blue turtleneck and white shorts. He gave off an arrogant air as his dark eyes studied Naruto. He'd been watching the fight intently and he didn't like what he saw. In his own fight he'd only managed to hit Iruka once and keep him on the defensive, and yet here was this newcomer who managed not only to fight him on equal ground but also win the fight. He was supposed to be the strongest, he needed the skills of this loser to help him kill that man, and he would find how this kid got those skills, and he would use them to his advantage. He stopped directly in front of Naruto, ignoring the others. Naruto looked at the boy with confusion. He'd never met the guy before, and here he just walks right up to him and stares at him. "Can I help you with something?" "How did you do that?" It was more of a demand than a question. "What the fight?" "I just used my taijutsu like I was taught," he answered. "Who taught you?" Another demand. A man called Guy Sensei. "Get him to teach me," the boy said. Naruto was taken aback by the guy's sudden order and slightly annoyed. "Sorry, but if you want him to teach you you'll need to ask him, but I should tell you he already has a genin team along with training me." The boy scowled. "Make him teach me." Naruto's annoyance showed. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" Before he could answer, Sakura gushed out a response. "That's Sasuke-kun, he's the best student in the academy and he's an Uchiha." Okay, now Naruto was annoyed and confused. "Uchiha? I thought they were all dead." He caught a flash of anger in Sasuke's eyes. "No, I survived, now will you tell your sensei to teach me?" He was getting tired of spending time with these weaklings. Naruto sighed. "Like I told you Sasuke-sen, you'd have to ask him, but I don't think he'll have the time." Sasuke scowled. "He'll have to make time." Naruto's eyes narrowed. Sasuke reeked of arrogance and apparently thought he deserved everything he wanted, and he knew that if he didn't end this conversation something would happen. He doesn't have Edo do anything. If he wants to teach you he will, but I suggest you change your attitude if you want anyone to do you a favor, Sasuke-san. If that's all, he turned away, intent on getting away from the Uchiha before his arm was grabbed in a harsh grip. He turned back slowly and saw that Sasuke had grabbed him, the others looking on with wary expressions. The raven-haired teen had a sneer on his face. "We're not done here, dope." Now, since being in Konoha, Naruto has learned many things. He'd learned that his life at the base sucked in comparison to his life in Konoha. He'd learned that Mido Guy had the worst fashion sense conceivable and passed said fashion sense onto his student Lee. He'd learned to finish his ramen before Rin, or he'd be defending his bowl from her addicted paws. He'd learned to stay away from Anko when she was on a sugar high and near kunai. However, one thing he discovered was something that he had been surprised by: he had a temper. Having never had anything at the base that would make him angry or agitated, he never had any experience with a violent emotion. However, he learned that while he could get angry, it wasn't easy to. But right now the Uchiha was causing that anger to rise slowly but surely. "I suggest you remove your hand, Sasuke-san," he said in a low voice, his blue eyes looking directly into Onyx one's. "Not until you tell me how you got those skills," the Uchiha told him while tightening his hold on Naruto's arm. "Let him go, team," Kiba barked, rising to his feet. He wasn't necessarily friends with Naruto, but any chance to fight Sasuke was worth taking. Sasuke looked at Inuzuka with contempt. "Stay out of this mud. If I wanted your input I would have asked for it, now show respect." Kiba would have flown for him if it wasn't for Chouji and Shikamaru holding him back. He didn't need to get himself thrown out of the exam for fighting. Naruto's jaw clenched. Sasuke's attitude was really pissing him off, and he still hadn't released his arm. "Sasuke-san, I really suggest you leave. Now," he warned, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Sasuke scoffed. "And if I don't?" Naruto bared his slightly longer than normal canines. "I'll make you." With that, he grabbed the Uchiha's wrist and squeezed, causing the circulation to stop and his hand to go limp. Sasuke winced involuntarily. The blonde had more strength than he thought. "Now either leave or I will hurt you," severely. Naruto growled. Sasuke looked at him for a moment before he jerked his hand out of the blonde's grip and stalked off. Naruto watched him go, remembering to ask Sarutobi Jiji about team placements and the possibility of not putting him with the Uchiha. He was kindly broken from his thoughts by Sakura. "You jerk. Now look at what you did," she screeched before she set off to comfort Sasuke. Ino looked indecisive for a moment before she followed after. Naruto watched them go incredulously. Didn't they hear the things he was saying? He turned to Shikamaru for answers. "Sasuke has quite the fan base for being the last Uchiha, even from the adults. Say anything against him and the local schoolgirls will turn on you like a bunch of vipers," he explained. "You should have slugged him," Kiba said, glaring in Uchiha's direction. "The bastard deserves a few black eyes." Naruto shook his head. "Probably, but we don't deserve to be disqualified. Just ignore him and don't let him get to you." They watched the rest of the spars, forgetting the arrogant Uchiha and his attitude. Sasuke seethed. No one talked to him like that. He needed power to avenge his clan, it was his purpose. He promised that he would put that done in his place and show him how great an Uchiha really was. Naruto was pleased with the outcome of the exam, coming second after the girl Hinata who used her Byakugan to see through the illusion the second it was cast. He wouldn't mind ranking first, but he didn't really mind, as long as he got a good mark. Now they sat in the classroom for their final exam, ninjutsu. Kakashi-sensei had told him of the 3 basics that a student needed to perform in order to pass. First was the replacement technique Kawarimi, the transformation hinge, and the clone technique Bunshin. He watched as the others all passed, tying on their forehead protectors with huge smiles. As Sasuke progressed through the test, he performed the first 2 with no problem, then created 5 clones, more than anyone else had. "Beat that dope," he whispered as he went past. Naruto grinned and with a sudden urge to annoy the Uchiha stood and walked to the front of the class. He first Kawarimi-ed with the chair, then transformed into Kurenai, but released it quickly after he saw several boys leering at him. Still grinning, he turned to Iruka. "Iruka-sensei, you said I had to perform a Bunshin, didn't you?" Iruka nodded and Naruto's grin widened. Flying through a few hand seals, he pronounced, "Mizu Bunshin no. The water in Iruka's glass on the table rose and formed a perfect clone of Naruto. He ignored the wide-eyed stares as he performed more seals. Oro Bunshin no. A pile of dirt flew through the window to create another clone. Rai Bunshin no. The static in the air formed another clone. Bunshin no. There was a gust of wind as the air spun, creating another clone. Naruto performed another set of hand seals, but instead of creating a clone, he made a ball of fire appear in his hand. He threw it into the air and formed more seals. Hai Bunshin no. The fire flowed and made a final clone. Iruka and the class were astounded. 5 solid clones. 1 for each element. That had never been done in the history of the academy. Iruka picked his jaw up off the floor and managed to splutter out a coherent sentence. Naruto was amazing. "How did you do that?" Naruto shrugged as the clones left through the window to safely dispel themselves. "I read it in a book somewhere." The sudden mental image of Sasuke running around the library, frantically looking for any books with power entered his mind, and he had to bite back his chuckles. "Well, congratulations. Here's your new forehead protector, you are now a ninja of Konoha." Iruka intoned as he handed the metal piece to Naruto. Smiling, he took it and walked back to his desk, pretending to ignore the death glare being sent his way by an irate Sasuke. Iruka stood in front of the class. "Well, that concludes the genin exam. For those of you that passed, congratulations, and to those that didn't, don't hold it against your classmates and try harder next year. Those of you who have passed, report here tomorrow for your new team assignments. Those of you who failed, wait behind so I can get the name of you who are going to take the exam next year." Dismissed. Naruto walked up the stairs to the apartment in high spirits. He was finally a ninja after all those months of training, even if he didn't need it all for the exams. As he fished out his keys, he began to wonder about the team placements. Who would be on his team? He hoped it was anyone but Sasuke, like Choji or Shikamaru or Kiba even. He began to wonder who his sensei would be. So far he didn't know anyone other than Asuma who would be taking a team this year, after he found Asuma crying one day going on about how the old man tricked him into taking a team. He pushed the key into the lock and opened the door to the dark apartment. He flicked on the light and was immediately rewarded with a heart attack. "Congratulations." Naruto yelped as fell back against the wall clutching his chest. He took in the scene before him. Kurenai, Sarutobi, Asuma, Kakashi, Rin, Anko, and Guy all stood in the living room of Kurenai's apartment, laughing at the panting boy in front of them. "What is going on?" he questioned, looking around the room at the smiling senseis, Ni-chans, and old Jiji. "It's your graduation party," Rin informed him as she pulled him further into the room, closing the door behind him. "What?" "When someone graduates, it's customary to hold a party in that person's honor," Sarutobi explained. "How did you know I passed?" Naruto asked Kurenai. "We just knew you would." "Oh." Naruto never noticed the Hokage kicking a certain crystal bowl behind the couch as he sat down. It was a night he would never forget. There had been food, drink, laughing, and talking, and best of all, presents. Anko had presented him with a small black boot knife with a red blade edge she dubbed the Crimson Widow. I had given him special wraps for his hands and feet which would become heavier as more chakra was pushed into them. He'd wanted to present him with a spandex suit before Sarutobi accidentally set it on fire with a katen. Kakashi had presented him with 3 scrolls containing the instructions for performing Futon, Tatapa, Suiton, Sugaton, and Doton, Doryudan. Rin gave him a small rectangular leather pouch with the winged kunai symbol of Konoha Shinobi Infirmary embossed on the front and a medical license allowing him access to all files and equipment at the hospital. When he turned to Asuma, the bearded Jounin grinned and presented him with a box. Naruto opened it to find a pair of trench knives like his old ones. He looked confused, so Asuma explained. "They are the same as your old knives, but these are made from a special alloy that allows you to push your chakra element through it. You remember when you split that piece of paper I gave you a few months ago?" That was to find out your element, which is wind, same as me. Naruto cocked his head to the side. What do you mean push your chakra element through it? Asuma's response was to take one of the knives and concentrate. In a second there was a pale blue edge of chakra along the blade, humming slightly. This is what I mean. By doing this you can push your wind element through it to make the blade stronger and sharper. It also allows you to do this. Asuma pushed a little more chakra into the blade and the edge of chakra suddenly shot out, extending over 4 feet and giving the knife the length of a sword. Naruto had stars in his eyes. He couldn't wait to try that out in a fight. The rest of the night went on with much laughter, and the last thing Naruto remembered was Kurenai helping him into bed with a whisper of, "I'm proud of you, Naruto." Naruto yawned as he sat in the academy class. He was in his new clothes, now including Anko's knife which was tucked into his sandal, Sarutobi Jiji's gloves, and Guy's weight wraps under his gloves and sandals, and he'd replaced the blue cloth on his forehead protector with a longer black one which reached down to his shoulders. He'd been up pretty late and slept in, so he had to run all the way to the academy. They were waiting on Iruka to give them their assignments, so he decided to get some shut-eye. His sleep was short-lived as the Chunin walked through the door 5 minutes later with a chart in his hand. "Alright guys, listen up. These are the assignments of your genin team, which you will be with until you reach Chunin, and maybe even Jounin. These are the people who will watch your back and possibly save your life one day, so listen good. How many other genin teams are still in circulation? So the first team is Team 7, consisting of Ino and Sakura. Please be Sasuke-kun, please be Sasuke-kun." She kept whispering. "Aburam Shino." The bug user didn't make any indication that he heard Iruka. "And Uchiha Sasuke." "Yes. True love conquers all." Sakura cheered while the girls all moaned quite pathetically. "Your Jounin sensei is Hada Kakashi. Teammate consists of Inyazuka Kiba, Yamanaka Ino." Ino's head fell to the desk and she let out a whine. "And Uzumaki Naruto." Ino perked up at that, though she didn't know why. Sasuke-kun was lost to her now. "Your Jounin sensei is Yuhi Kurenai." Naruto brightened at that. If Kurenai was his sensei they'd have a great time. Finally Team 10 will consist of Nara Shikamaru, Akimichi Chouji, and Hyuga Hinata. A Jounin sensei will be Sarutobi Asuma. Wait here for your senses, they will be here shortly. With that said he left, leaving the genin to wait. They didn't have to wait long, as Kurenai was the first to arrive. "I'm here for Team 8. She called as she walked in wearing her combat gear. Naruto smiled as she walked up to her. "Hey Ni-chan." She smiled back. "Hello Naruto. Follow me there." She led them out of the academy and into the village. After 10 minutes they came to a park where Kurenai sat them under a large tree beside a lake. Kurenai made sure they were comfortable before they began. "It's good to finally meet you. As you know, I'm your sensei Yuhi Kurenai. Having read your files I know all about you, but you don't know anything about me or your teammates. Let's introduce ourselves." Ino raised her hand. Sensei. Why don't you show us what you mean?" Kurenai nodded. "Okay. My name is Yuhi Kurenai. I like my family," she smiled at Naruto, "having fun with my friends Rin and Anko, and developing and learning new things. I dislike perverts, little orange books, and certain one-armed traders. My hobbies are tending my plants and painting. My dream is to become the best mistress in the elemental nations. You next." She pointed at Kiba. He starched Akamaru as he talked. "My name's Inyazuka Kiba. I like dogs, especially Akamaru, my clan, and having fun. I dislike people who are cruel to animals, my deadbeat father wherever he may be, and cats. My hobbies include bugging my Ni-chan, taking Akamaru for walks, and going on family tracking trips with my Kasan and Ni-chan. My dream is to be the best tracker the Inyazuka have seen since my Jiji." Kurenai smiled approvingly. "That's an admirable goal, I'll do my best to help. Next." It was Ino's turn. "I'm Yamanaka Ino. I like flowers, my family, and Sasuke-kun." When Kiba groaned, Ino knocked him over the head. "I dislike dogs," she said, looking pointedly at Kiba. "Heights, and the color pink. My hobbies include flower arranging, gossiping, and singing. My dream is to replace my daddy as the head of the Anbu Information Division and win Sasuke-kun's heart." Kiba was once again smacked for groaning at the Uchiha's name. Kurenai mentally screamed. She hates fangirls, they gave Kunoichi everywhere a bad name. Disregarding the second dream, Kurenai said, "You'll have your work cut out for you if you're going to take your father's job, but I'll help all I can." Next. Naruto started. "My name's Uzumaki Naruto. I like my new family, ramen, and my new home. I dislike cold weather when Rin Ni-chan tries to take my ramen, getting up early, and perverts. My hobbies include reading, training, learning new things, and walking outside. My dream is that." Naruto trailed off when a sudden thought occurred to him. What did he want? Now that he was out of the base, he had a world of choices. He could join Anbu, retire, have a family, teach a genin team, and much more. There was so much to choose from that we couldn't decide right away. I don't really know. Kurenai frowned slightly, but pushed on. Well, now that we know each other, I should tell you something, you are not genin. What? Came the reply from the three students, but Kurenai held up a hand to silence them. You're not genin yet. There is one more test you must take, a survival test. The genin exam was to see if you had the skills to become genin, but this text sees if you will become genin. What do we do? Kiba asked as he leaned forward, Akamaru perched on his head. Follow me. Kurenai quickly stood and set off into the trees, and through Konoha, her team followed after. She gradually picked up speed to test their stamina and noted that while Naruto and Kiba managed to keep up, Ino was starting to lag behind. Going to have to fix that, she thought, as she reduced her speed slightly. After 5 minutes they came to an empty training field surrounded by trees. As Naruto, Kiba and Ino caught up, she pulled a crimson silk ribbon from her vest and held it out for them to see. The purpose of the exercise is to steal this ribbon from me within the time limit. You may do whatever you need to get it, and I should tell you now, if you don't come at me with the intent to kill, you will fail. She tucked the ribbon into her back pocket, leaving one end dangling out, and fluttered in the breeze. You have until the sun sets, which is about 5 hours. Get ready. She raised her arm. The three teens tensed, preparing to do whatever they needed to win that ribbon and their genin titles. Ino was slightly nervous at the prospect of failing the test and going back to the academy. Kiba was quietly talking to Akamaru, going over his plan to get the ribbon. Naruto was slightly worried about Kurenai telling them to have the intent to kill, but reminded himself that she was strong and she could take care of herself. He set his face, and determination shone in his eyes. Kurenai smiled at her students. This would prove interesting. She dropped her arm. Begin. The three genin moved the second Kurenai's hand fell. Naruto ran through the trees aiming to get behind his Nichan. Ino crouched in a tree observing the proceedings. Kiba was standing in front of Kurenai with his arms crossed. She curled an eyebrow. You're not going to try to take me head on, are you? He laughed as he set Akamaru on the ground. Heh, this should be easy. You can't keep your eyes on both of us at the same time. Come on, Akamaru. Man and dog rushed forward, claws and fangs bared. Kurenai sighed. It was going to be a long day. When the Inyazuka reached her, she spun around his attack and shoved him in the back, sending him tumbling forward. Then spun and stooped low, scooping Akamaru off the ground and tossed him through the air into Kiba's arms. She crossed her arms and smirked. This isn't going to work, you know. Kiba's response was to take a swipe at her, which was caught by Kunoichi's hand. She yanked him around and slammed him into Akamaru, who tried to lunge at her, sending them both flying through the air and into the forest. Kiba twisted in the air to take Akamaru out of harm's way and crashed into a tree. Ino's eyes bulged. Kurenai had taken Kiba out with no effort, and the Inyazuka was the third best taijutsu fighter in the academy. There was no way she could get that ribbon. She was trying to find a solution to her problem when something tapped her on the back. She nearly screamed out when a hand was clapped over her mouth and her head was turned to face Naruto. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. He released her. I think we need a plan if we're going to get that ribbon. You saw how easily she took out Kiba, and I know from training with her that Kurenai Nichan is no pushover. Ino glanced over to where Kurenai was standing. But what can we do? She's a jounin, and we're new genin. There's no way we can win. Naruto smiled. Kurenai Nichan knows what I can do, so she'll know how to stop me, but there's a good chance she'll underestimate you or Kiba. As they laid out a plan, Kurenai stood where she started, tapping her foot in an attempt to stave off boredom. She had thought that Naruto would have at least probed her defenses by now. She was not bored for long when a large mass of spinning teeth and claws came barreling out of the trees and straight for her. Suuga. She leaped out of the way and turned to see Kiba standing there looking more feral than ever. I thought you might have been knocked out when I threw you. She commented, as if talking about the weather. Kiba just growled. She was about to bait him again when she sensed movement behind her, and she spun to see another Kiba coming straight for her. She heard the first Kiba make his move and she smirked. She waited until both Kibas were close enough before she leaped straight up into the air. The two Kibas had been running too fast to stop, and, as a result, they ran straight into each other. I'll give you points for strategy, Kiba, that was a good plan. Kurenai said from the tree branch she stood on. The Inyazuka didn't respond as he tried to detangle himself from his transformed partner. She saw Naruto jump out of the far tree line and she smiled. I was wondering what was keeping you, Naruto. Naruto didn't speak as he jumped over the Inyazuka dog pile and made a seal. Kage Bunshin no 3 copies of the blonde burst into existence and, as one, they leaped for Kurenai. Slightly disappointed with the blunt strategy, Kurenai kicked back into the trees behind her as the clones followed, leaving Kiba and Akamaru sprawled on the ground in the clearing. Don't you think this is a little foolish, Naruto-kun? Attacking a jounin head-on? The four Narutos just smirked and lunged for her. Kurenai quickly pulled out a kunai and blocked the first clone's attack while the other two attempted to grab her by the arms. She grabbed the first clone and swung him around, using him to bat away the other two. They vanished in a burst of smoke and she looked around to see the real Naruto standing on a branch a few feet from her. What are you up to, Naruto? She thought. Naruto smirked as if reading her mind and pulled out his trench knives. Kurenai pulled out another kunai and the two stared at each other for a moment before they flew for each other. Back at the clearing, Kiba finally managed to detangle himself from his transformed partner. He wasn't amused with the fact that Naruto had interfered with his fight. I nearly had that ribbon, damn it. Then he comes out of nowhere and gets in the way. He spun around when he felt something tap him on the shoulder and he found himself face to face with Ino. What is it, Ino? I need to get that ribbon before Naruto does. Ino just rolled her eyes at Kiba's typical boy attitude. I came to tell you that we, as in me and Naruto, came up with a plan to get that ribbon and we just thought you'd want in on it. Kiba crossed his arms. What makes you think I need your help? Ino arched an eyebrow. Besides the fact that Kurenai-sensei just handed your ass to you without even trying. Kiba's eyebrow twitched. He knew he was beaten pretty badly, but did she have to say it so blandly? He sighed. Fine, what's the plan? Well, Ino explained it to him and Kiba nodded his approval. It was a good plan and sounded like it could work. Okay. Let's do it. Kurenai dropped and rolled to avoid the barrage of fireballs Naruto sent her way before she launched her kunai through the air. The blade pierced Naruto's throat and his expression changed to one of surprise before he was replaced with a log and a burst of smoke. She heard the sound of a blade cutting through the air and she spun in time to block the two trench knives before they decapitated her. You won't beat me, Naruto-kun. She baited with a smirk. Naruto growled in frustration and aimed a kick at her legs, which she blocked. Kurenai brought up her leg and kicked Naruto across the clearing to give herself a breather. He couldn't beat her in a fight, but some of the tricks he used to get that ribbon were sneaky as hell and it took some effort to avoid him. She glanced around the crater-marred landscape as she cracked her neck. Naruto was using all of the training he had amassed in the past 6 months to the fullest. He had probably used more chakra in some of those attacks than most jounin had in their reserves. Couple that with his skill with his knives and his capoeira aerial and you have one very deadly blonde. Naruto rolled to his feet and glared at Kurenai. He had tried his hardest and still he couldn't land a decisive blow on her. What she didn't know is that he wasn't trying to get the ribbon, he was trying to tire her out or wound her enough to slow her down. He closed his eyes and used his higher than normal senses to check the surrounding forest. He could hear birds chirping, feel the direction of the wind on his skin, and could smell the scent of the forest. There were two particular scents that he was looking for and he fought back a smirk as he smelled them. Time to put the plan into action. Naruto gripped his knives tightly as he took a deep breath. Suddenly his eyes snapped open and he tore across the ground towards Kurenai. He saw a flicker of annoyance and disappointment cross her face and he grinned. Just as he was about to reach her, there was a sound of trees being shredded and from behind Naruto, two twirling masses of air and claws burst from the trees. Atsuga. Kurenai's eyes widened. She had almost forgotten about Kiba. She launched herself backwards to avoid Naruto's slash before she leaped up and over him. She landed and rolled, barely dodging Kiba and Akamaru. She looked over her shoulder to see Naruto, Kiba, and a transformed Akamaru grinning at her, their canines glinting in the sun. They never paused as Naruto ran at her, Kiba and Akamaru flanking him. The blonde launched a kick at her, which she nimbly ducked at the same moment she blocked punches from the Inuzuka partners. Naruto managed to kick her in the stomach, forcing her backwards. She tossed a kunai at him just as Kiba and Akamaru started up their Gatsuga again. She jumped backwards, narrowly dodging the attack, and she felt a tree against her back when she felt two hands wrap around her ankles in preparation for the Doten. Shinjutsu no Jutsu. She quickly forced chakra into her feet to avoid being pulled underground. She thought she was safe until she heard Ino's voice. Shintenshin no Jutsu. Kurenai vaguely felt her body slump to the ground as she was forced into the recesses of her own mind and another soul took over her body. Naruto, Kiba and Akamaru watched Kurenai warily. The plan went off without a hitch so far, but everything depended on this. The Yamanaka family allowed the user to take over someone's mind and body, but those with strong enough willpower are able to fight it off. They tensed as Kurenai slowly rose from the ground. She looked up with a smirk plastered on her face. It worked, she said. The boys sighed in relief and relaxed their stance. The Ino-possessed Kurenai walked up to them and pulled a long red ribbon from her pocket and handed it to Naruto before she turned around and sat against a tree. Kiba and Naruto pulled out their spools of ninja wire and quickly tied Kurenai to the tree, making sure to tie her fingers so she was unable to perform. Kurenai slumped forward, unconscious, and a few moments later Ino walked out from the bushes she hid in to perform her. The genin shared a triumphant grin. They had passed. "Better wake her up," Ino said. Naruto nodded and moved to kneel beside Kurenai as he pulled some smelling salts from his pouch. He waved them under her nose and she jerked awake, her eyes watery from the powerful smell of the salts. She looked up to see her 3 students smiling down at her. "Alright you 3, the test is over. You've won." Grinning, Naruto reached down with a kunai and cut the wires. Kurenai stood and shook her arms to get the circulation going again. "How did you do it?" she asked. The 3 looked at each other and by some unspoken agreement it was decided that Naruto would be the spokesperson. "We knew we'd never get the ribbon alone," he began. "I found Ino and we worked out a plan. I chased you out of the clearing and Ino told Kiba what we were up to. My job was to wear you down while they talked and wait for the signal. When I smelled Ino's perfume and the scent of Akamaru's urine on one of the trees, I knew that they were ready. I ran forward to attack you, making sure to stay ahead of Kiba, and when you jumped over me I made a kage bunshin and went underground using Doten Shinjutsu no Jutsu. Kiba, Akamaru, and the clone forced you back against the tree where I held you in one place for Ino to use her family to get the ribbon," he finished. Kurenai smiled at her team. It was an ingenious plan and they realized the importance of teamwork, the real answer to the genin exam. "Good work. I'm proud of you all for managing to come together as a team to complete your objective. You put aside your differences for one purpose and managed to get the ribbon from me, and in doing so, you have proven yourselves worthy of the rank of genin." The 3 genin smiles could have lit up most of Konoha. After 4 long years, at least in Kiba and Ino's case, they were finally genin. "We'll go get some food to celebrate and tomorrow we'll begin taking missions." Kurenai led her new genin team towards the village. Life was going to get interesting with these 3 around. "I'm going to kill her slowly and painfully if this keeps up," Ino swore to herself. They had begun taking missions the day after the genin exam like Kurenai promised. At first they were a bit surprised and disappointed at the nature of those missions. When they were at the academy they expected to be doing things like escorts and protecting important political bodies, but they weren't expecting to be doing this. Their first D-rank mission was to do grocery shopping for an old lady who couldn't get around very well. They were shocked at this, but they let it slide, hoping that it was a one-time thing. When they showed up for another mission they were told they had to build a new fence for a farmer, and again they set out for another boring mission. It was made painfully clear that they wouldn't be getting any interesting missions anytime soon, and with each trivial task they had to perform, Ino's patience got even more worn down, and it was only a matter of time before she made it known, and that time was now. They had just arrived in the Hokage's office after a particularly stressful mission. They had to look after the grandchildren of one of the elders. 4 little demonic creatures that the elder liked to delude herself into calling babies. Ino thought they would tackle the mission like every other, they would each take a fair share of the work and try to complete it as quickly as possible. Unfortunately she didn't factor in the cowardice of her 2 teammates. Kiba spent the entire time trying to keep Akamaru out of the kids' reach while she was laden with 3 children who had taken to eating her hair. Naruto just looked lost the whole time, as if he had no clue as to what they should be doing, and she felt less resentful towards his slaking than she did Kiba's, but she was still mad. Kurenai-sensei had been no help at all, as she said that it was their mission, and so Ino was forced to look after all 4 babies by herself. When they finally emerged from the elder's home Ino swore that it would be the last time they had to do these so-called missions. And Yamanaka Ino always got her way. Currently they are standing in the Hokage's office awaiting their next mission. Teammate reporting. Mission successful. Kurenai stood at ease in front of Sarutobi's desk, her 3 genin standing behind her. "Ah, enjoy yourselves did you?" Sarutobi asked as he hid his smile behind his hand. The worn genin glared at him, looking extremely haggard. "It was eventful, sir." Kurenai allowed a small smile when she felt Ino's killing intent spike sharply. Sarutobi chuckled as he reached for a pile of mission request forms. Ino's eyebrow twitched dangerously as she recognized the yellow tab marking them as D rank. "There are a few new missions that just came in so you'll get first pick. There is cleaning the Inyazuka pens, litter picking at Hoshigami Park, help construction workers at the arena." "No." Ino cut him off. She was too far gone to care that she was on the edge of insubordination. These damn missions would end now. "Give us any mission that doesn't involve this lowly grunt work. Please, I don't know how much more I can take before I kill someone." Sarutobi sat back in his chair, a small smile playing about his lips. The team had performed more than the necessary amount of D ranks to warrant a higher ranked mission, and he didn't doubt that the team could look after themselves and get the job done, but there was one thing that worried him. They haven't found out if Danzo was actively seeking Naruto out. Being Danzu's former lead agent, Fox was undoubtedly a loose end that Danzu wanted taken care of. The only question was Danzu looking for Fox, or would he wait for the opportunity to kill him? With Root's diminished numbers, influence, and supplies, Danzo would have to manage his resources carefully if he wanted to take over Konoha. He looked at Kurenai. She was fully aware of Sarutobi's concerns and shared them. She knew the possibility of coming under attack by Root operatives, but she wasn't worried about herself, being trained by a Sannin, and her own strengths made her one of the strongest ninja in the village on par with Kakashi and Guy. She was worried about the safety of her students. Fortunately, she always had backup in the form of Fox. If things got too bad, then all she had to do was remove Naruto's collar and allow Fox to take over. Still, it was her choice. What do you think about Kurenai? Are they ready? Kurenai shrugged. They've been ready for a while. I think that they'd be able to handle a C-rank mission. She turned to them. Do you think you're ready for a more riskier mission? Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. Give us any mission you got, old man, we'll complete it in no time. Ino and Kiba looked at Naruto in shock. They'd finally managed to convince the Hokage to grant them a higher ranked mission, and Naruto's lack of respect was about to ruin it. He was a dead man. Okay then. Sarutobi said as he reached for the C-rank pile. Ino and Kiba turned their shocked looks on the Hokage. He didn't even bat an eye at Naruto's disrespect of calling him an old man. Before they could voice their confusion, Sarutobi pulled out a mission file. Here we go, a mission to the capital. There have been a series of strange occurrences in the city as of late, thefts, break-ins, and even 1 or 2 murders. The daimyo's guard has had no luck in the investigation and, as such, have seen fit to request ninja assistance. They believe a gang of bandits are operating somewhere inside the city, but have had no luck locating them. Your mission is to investigate and either capture or eliminate the bandits and, if you can, recover any hostages and stolen items you find. Kurenai nodded and took the scroll from the Hokage, tucking it into one of her vest pockets. The genin shared grins. They were finally going on a real mission. Kurenai turned to her team. Go home and pack a week's worth of supplies. The mission may not be that long, but it's better to be prepared. We'll meet up at the main gate at 9 AM tomorrow morning. They nodded and trooped out the door with Kurenai following. They had a mission to prepare for. At 9 the next morning, Naruto and Kurenai were the first to arrive, followed closely by Ino, then a dreary-eyed Kiba and Akamaru. How long is it going to take to get to the capital? Kiba asked as he covered his mouth to stifle a huge yawn. We should arrive by the end of the day. We'll rest for the night in the city before we start our investigation. Kurenai told them as she readjusted her pack. As she went over to talk to the Chunin guarding the gates, Ino looked out at the road leading away from the village. This would be the first time she had ever stepped outside the village, and to be honest, she was a little scared. There had never been a need to leave the village before, and she had heard all about the dangers that lurked beyond the walls from her daddy's stories and from what she learned in the academy. She knew that Kurenai would be with them, but she still felt that little sliver of apprehension. It must have shown on her face because Naruto saw that something was bugging her. You okay, Ino? He asked, concerned. Huh? She turned to face him. Yeah, just a little nervous. I've never left the village before. We'll be fine. He assured her, a smile on his face. We're strong, and we have Kurenai Ni-chan with us, so there's nothing to worry about. She didn't know why, but Naruto's reassurance made her feel better. Thanks, Naruto. Then a thought occurred to her. Hey Naruto, you've lived outside the village most of your life, right? What was it like? Naruto's mind went into panic mode. It was true that he told everyone that he lived outside the village for all his life, but he had no experience of living outside to back it up, no stories to tell, or rather no stories he was allowed to tell. He had no choice but to use one of the skills Anko had taught him. The ability to lie through your teeth. Well, I lived in a small lumber village, not very exciting. The most interesting thing I could tell you about would be chasing off the occasional wolf. He mentally crossed his fingers hoping she would buy it. She did. Oh. Kurenai walked back to them. We're ready to go. Is everyone ready? Yeah. Yes. Sure thing. Then let's go. And with that, Kurenai led them out the gate and down the road. They took to the trees, bounding from one branch to the next, occasionally indulging in idle conversation, but traveling in silence for the most part. They stopped for a break at noon before continuing on with a rest stop every few hours. It was 2 PM before they stopped at a small town for lunch. They found a cafe and sat at one of the outdoor tables while they ate. What's a capital like, Kurenai-sensei? Asked Ino as she ate her salad. She was on another new diet, and no matter how hungry traveling made her, she was determined to stick to it. Kurenai put down her red bean soup as she thought. The city is called Nain. It is one of the largest cities in the Land of Fire and is the center of government and the home of the daimyo, the administrative leader of the Land of Fire. It is also one of the wealthiest cities in the elemental nations and is sometimes called the Jewel of the Flame. We'll be staying in the daimyo's mansion while we work, and we'll receive assistance from the city guard if we need it. Ino and Kiba listened intently, soaking in the details, but Naruto just slurped his ramen, only giving the conversation half an ear. He knew it all already anyway, so there wasn't much that he didn't know about the city anyway. With the amount he'd read, there wasn't much he didn't know about anything. After they ate, they continued on through the trees. The sun was low now, casting a pinkish-orange tinge across the sky. They noticed an increase of roads and travelers, and it was safe to assume that they were getting close to Nain. It was when they came to the top of a rather large hill that they first saw the city. It was larger than Konoha. The utmost buildings were common middle and lower class homes, which became more ornate and larger the closer they got to the center. There was a large stone wall encircling the city, manned with samurai and guarded with towers and buttresses. There were 3 large gates that served as entrances, each leading onto a long, straight road that stopped at the perimeter wall of the daimyo's mansion and the main government building where the daimyo and his advisors would meet to run the administrative side of the Land of Fire, while the Hokage ran the military side. They had to wait in a rather long line before they were granted entry. When Kurenai told the guard at the gate that they were the ninjas sent to investigate the strange occurrences in the city, they were asked to wait in a room in the gatehouse. After about 5 minutes, a man entered the room. He was clad in the dark red armor and black cloth of the city guard and had a long katana strapped to his side. His head was shaved and had quite a few deep scars on it. Evidently he was no stranger to combat. "Kurenai-san, I am Genji Hizaki, one of the captains of the daimyo city guard." He nodded to the jounin. "I've been instructed to act as a guide and liaison between you and the city guard." "Hizaki-san." She greeted me. "Can you tell us anything about the investigation?" "Yes, I can tell you all I know on the way to your quarters. If you'll follow me." He led them out of the gatehouse towards the daimyo's mansion. The first incident was a break-in in the Greater Nain Bank. Somehow someone managed to enter the vault and stole a considerable amount of money. We investigated but found no clues and have no idea how they got into the vault. They paused to allow a merchant cart to cross the road before continuing on. The next crime was the murder of 2 guard captains. Their bodies were found in an alley. They had their throats cut and there were no clues as to who did it, but there was something strange. Their legs were wet from the knee down, but there was no substantial body of water in the area, so we think it was a body dump. They were coming up to the perimeter wall of the daimyo's mansion now. The last incident occurred inside the Grand Archive. One of the servants noticed water on the floor beside a closed window. It had been raining outside, so it was easy to conclude that someone sneaked in through the window, and the servant alerted the guards. We raised the alarm, but found nothing. After that, we decided to call in ninja assistants to be on the safe side. They walked up to the main entrance, a large ornate set of double doors which were opened by 2 guards, and went inside. The house was rather traditional, made of polished wood with flowing designs carved into it and rice paper sliding doors. The floors were covered by a deep red luscious carpet, and there were antique vases and weapons on stands and in cases in alcoves lining the corridors. They were standing in a large open section that was used to greet the guests. In front of them was a large staircase, and there were doorways and halls leading further into the house. Hizaki left saying he needed to get back to his post and to call if they needed anything. They were led to their rooms by a servant, and after ordering food they decided to plan for tomorrow. They were currently sitting on the floor of the boys' room surrounded by empty food trays. "Tomorrow we'll start looking for clues," Kurenai said to her gathered genin. "First we'll go to the bank and search the vault, and then we'll go and see what we can gather from the dead guards. I'd usually split us up into groups, but this is a first-time C-rank mission and makes me want to be on the safe side." "Any idea who is responsible for this?" Ino asked. She was already in her pajamas, hugging her knees to her chest. Kurenai shook her head. The guards seemed convinced that it was a gang of bandits, but no run-of-the-mill bandit could be this clean. There was no evidence of the dead guards, and none at either the bank or the Grand Archive. "I think this may have been a professional thief mercenary group. Until we see otherwise, we're going to assume that the murders and the break-ins are separate incidents." "What happens if we find the guys responsible?" asked Kiba as he stroked a dozing Akamaru. Kurenai leaned her head back against the wall. This was one of the hardest parts of being a sensei. We either try to capture them, or if that option is unavailable to us, we will need to kill them. The color drained from the genin's faces as they stared at Kurenai in shock. They knew that they would eventually need to kill, But they didn't expect it to be this soon, and the prospect of killing was never a nice prospect. Kurenai could see their hesitation on their faces and understood their reluctance. She and Minato had been the same when they were on their first C rank with Jiraiya, and he'd explained it to them in one of his very few non-perverted moments. "I know that you are against the idea of killing someone." She began slowly, making sure the genin understood her. "But you must understand that there are times when you must take the life of an enemy. Sometimes you have no choice but to kill your enemy to stop him from harming anyone further down the line. You knew that you would have to kill one day, and I know that you wouldn't have thought it would be this soon, but this is the life you have chosen. Remember, one moment of hesitation could lead to your death, the death of your team, and the death of innocent people. I'm not saying that you should feel nothing of killing or feel the need to kill on a whim, that would only lead you down the path of destruction. However, you must realize the difference between killing in service to your village and to protect those you love and killing out of bloodlust." Naruto, Ino, and Kiba sat in silence as they digested Kurenai's words. It was all true, they did swear to live and die in service to their village, and part of the deal was the necessity to kill. Kurenai had a point about stopping criminals before they could cause more pain further on in life, and sometimes the stop had to be permanent. But these thoughts in their heads, the genin broke up and got some sleep. They have a big day tomorrow. The Greater Neian Bank was one of the newer additions to the capital city of Fire Country. After the previous Bank of Neian burned down, the Greater Neian Bank was commissioned in its place. The building was of Western architecture, a large construct of smooth gray stone and metal-framed glass windows. The marble floors and walls of the place added to the splendor, emphasizing the bank's reputation of servicing the elites of Fire Country. It was deep underground that the vaults were. One corridor contained 9 large vault doors, and beyond those doors was a multitude of wealth. It was within the largest and most well-protected vault that Team Kurenai began their investigation. There was no hole in the wall, no trashed vault or anything out of place. In fact, there was not anything to suggest that the vault had been robbed, other than the fact that the safety deposit boxes were all empty, but the things like jewels and money were untouched. "This is so weird," Kiba commented as he prodded a pile of coins on one of the tables in the vault. "Why go to all the trouble to break into one of the most well-guarded banks in the country and not take any money? Not everything of worth is made of gold or silver, Kiba," Kurenai told him. "Some of the documents that were stolen were of immense value if used correctly. Has anyone been in here since the robbery?" Naruto asked. Kurenai shook her head. "Besides the clerk that discovered that the documents were missing and the guards, there has been no one. Can you find a trace of Kiba?" Inyazuka looked around the vault and shook his head. "No. Any trace would have vanished by now, and if the culprit was as good as we think, then it is safe to assume that he knows how to mask his scent. I can't find anything either." Ino sighed as she disengaged the fingerprints. Kurenai took one last glance around the vault. There was nothing that would lead them to the culprit here. She sighed as she turned to the door. "Then let's go. Next stop, the morgue." In one corner of Neian General Hospital, Kurenai, Naruto, Ino, Kiba, and Akamaru crowded around the first of 2 slabs. Upon each slab was a sheet-covered body, and at the side of the slabs were 2 trays which held a scroll each. Their breath fogged in the cooled air as they pulled the cover back from the first body. Ino gagged and moved away quickly before she threw up. Kiba looked green but swallowed and forced himself to stay. Kurenai and Naruto looked at the body with grim expressions. The man's neck was brutally cut, going most of the way through and almost severing his head from his shoulders. His skin was white and his lips were blue. Kurenai glanced over the dead guard before looking over the autopsy report. There was nothing she didn't already know from looking over the body. He had died of blood loss from the cut to his neck, and there were no other marks or bruises on the body. She sighed. "Kiba, can you get a trace?" Kiba shook his head. "No. Even without trying I can tell we'll get nothing. He's been dead too long." Kurenai sighed again. She had expected as much. "Okay, Ino." The platinum blonde looked up. "Sensei. Have you been getting training into your clan?" "Yes." "Have you learned the Urobosaki no?" Ino's eyes widened. The faint memory recall was used to try and access the final memory from a dead person's mind. It was imperative that it was used as soon after the death, as the memory quickly faded from the mind. It was different from other Yamanaka because the user didn't enter the mind, they scanned it. Ino nodded. "I began learning it about a week ago. I'm not the best at it, but I think I can get by if I concentrate hard enough." "Then when you're ready." Kurenai took a step back and allowed Interim to work. The Yamanaka heir took a deep breath. She brought her hands together and began a long chain of hand seals, focusing her chakra. She lightly placed her fingers against the sides of the man's head and began to gently push her chakra into his mind. She began to hear faint whispers so quiet she thought that she may have been imagining them, as strange smoky shapes tried feebly to take form in front of her mind's eye. The guard's final memories were deteriorating fast, so she needed to work quickly. Slowly the smoke began to take shape and she found herself in a dark tunnel, illuminated only by the torch in the guard's hand. The sound of sloshing water and the chattering of rats filled her ears. The scene tilted and Ino found herself facing another guard's face. She was seeing the memory through the dead guard's eyes. Ino strained her ears and heard the faint remnants of the conversation between the guards. "Stupid, nothing down here." The second guard shook his head. "No, I heard something here." The guards moved further into the tunnel, hands on their swords, as they searched. Suddenly the first guard put his hand on the other's shoulder, stopping him. He pointed down the tunnel, and the second noticed a faint firelight coming from another tunnel. The two guards nodded to each other and turned off their torches, while at the same time pulling their swords from their sheaths. As quietly as they could they approached the light, straining their ears for any signs of an enemy. They pressed up against the wall, and the first guard carefully looked around the corner. The tunnel opened up into an underground chamber. It was about 20 meters across and circular. The walls, floor and ceiling were made of the same old scum-encrusted stone. The floor was dry of water and it showed signs of habitation. Human habitation. There were 6 empty sleeping bags around a small fire. Nearby there were 2 old-looking tables topped with scrolls and a few pieces of old food. The first guard looked back at his companion and motioned for him to follow. They walked into the chamber, glancing around for any clues as to who would be down here. He walked over to the table and picked up one of the scrolls. He opened it and his eyes widened as he recognized the plans for the daimyo's mansion. He called over his partner and showed him the blueprints, eyes wide with shock at what this could mean. They needed to show this to their captain. Suddenly the sound of quick, soft footsteps had them turning, swords raised to defend themselves. They never had a chance. A moving shadow slashed at them, and a flash of silver later the blood of the guards covered the floor and the world went black. Ino's eyes snapped open and she found herself back in the morgue. She let out a long slow breath and took a step back from the body, making sure to avoid looking at the brutal neck wound. "Ino?" Kurenai asked, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. Ino looked up at the raven-haired jounin and shook her head. "I'm okay, Kurenai-sensei, the technique just takes a lot out of me." "What did you see?" Ino explained everything she could, leaving out no detail. By the end the others were frowning in thought. "Can you think of any place like Nichan?" Naruto asked, crossing his arms in a thinking pose he had picked up from somewhere. Kurenai shook her head. "None that I know of, but I haven't been in the capital that many times, so we'll have to ask Captain Hizaki." "You didn't see the attacker's face?" she asked Ino. She shook her head. "He was in the shadows, and it happened too fast." Kurenai shook her head. "Check the other one. I doubt that we'll get anything else, but check anyway." She was right. The second guard's memory was even more deteriorated than the first's. There was only one other way that they would have a chance at a clue. Kurenai picked up the scrolls, placing them on the floor. She unrolled them to their full lengths, side by side to reveal a simple storage seal on each scroll. She placed her fingers to the parchment and forced her chakra into them, the seals issuing a large cloud of smoke. When it cleared there were 2 sets of bloody guard uniforms and 2 katanas. The 3 genin gagged and coughed at the rancid smell that was emitted by the equipment, the odor affecting Naruto and Kiba more because of their sensitive noses. "What the hell is that smell?" Kiba coughed, backing away from the equipment. Kurenai wrinkled her nose and waved a hand in front of her face in a failed attempt to clear the air. "I don't know, but it must be important." She waved the 3 children over. "Tell me what you see." They needed to learn to look for evidence, and she wouldn't always be there to help. They stepped up to the clothes. They had been put in the scrolls as soon as they were collected, so they were as they were when they were found. Ino was the first to speak. Besides the smell, the blood patterns matched the neck wounds. Kiba was next. The katana have no blood or nicks on the blade, proving that they were not used. Naruto completed the analysis. "The pants are wet from the knee down with some discoloration," he said, pointing to the pants. The clothes were black, but there was some noticeable change in the shade of the fabric, and off-colored water was dripping off the pants and onto the scrolls. "And there was no water near where they were found," Kurenai added. "Can you get a scent?" she asked Kiba. The Inyazuka took a tentative sniff and gagged again before he shook his head. "There are too many mixed scents and it's hard to get any individual one." "What about you?" he asked Akamaru. The little white dog yipped and barked up at his partner and Kiba sighed. "The same goes for Akamaru, can't pick apart the scents." Kurenai sighed. No wonder the guards called in ninja assistants, this was annoying as hell. No clues, no witnesses, and no leads. Whoever did this was good, she'd give them that. She got up from the floor and looked at her team. "Well, since the only clue at the Grand Archive was a puddle of water that has probably already evaporated, let's get back to our room and go over what we know. We'll go from there." Team Kurenai left the hospital with damp spirits. This mission was not going as well as they hoped it would. Naruto sighed as he walked down the streets. It had been 2 days since they arrived in Nain, and the mission had come to a grinding halt. There were just not enough clues to give them any idea where to start looking for the one responsible for the murders and the thefts. They had asked Captain Hizaki about the tunnels Ino saw in the dead guard's memory, but the captain couldn't think of a place like that, so they were forced to resort to searching the city for a place matching the description, and Hizaki said he'd tell his men to keep an eye out as well. Right now Naruto was headed back to their rooms in the daimyo's mansion. It had been his turn to fetch lunch, and, as the team hadn't been in the mood for the fancy things at the mansion, he was forced to go out to find food for the team. In the bag hanging from his hand were some dango for Kurenai, some hot dogs for him, and kiba, and a low-fat, low-calorie sandwich thing for Ino. He had to wait for over 10 minutes while she counted up how many calories she had eaten that week and was nearly sent head first through the floor when he told her that she wouldn't get fat and that she would look even more pretty if she put on a few pounds. He never noticed the blush that bloomed across her cheeks as she made him kiss the ground. He turned the corner towards the mansion and was immediately hit with a repulsive odor. A strangely familiar odor. He sped towards the source and soon found himself in front of a section off part of the street with construction workers going back and forth around a large crack in the ground where the smell was coming from. Naruto called out to one of the workers. "Hey, what happened here?" The worker looked up, his eyes momentarily flicking to the eight tied around Naruto's head. There was a rupture in one of the sewer pipes and the pressure cracked the pavement. We needed to section off the street to fix it. Naruto's eyes widened as he pieced the clues together. He needed to tell Kurenai this. So the odor from the guard's clothes was from the sewer? Kiba asked. Naruto ran back to the room, gathered the team, and explained his findings. It finally made sense, the dirty water and the smells on the guard's clothes was from sewer water, and so the guards must have been killed in a sewer tunnel. If he was right, then they could locate their targets and complete the mission. Kurenai saw a flaw in the explanation. For nearly as long as the city has stood, there were sewer pipes to carry away waste, not sewer tunnels. I don't even know if there are tunnels under the city. Ask Captain Hizaki. Naruto offered. They sent a messenger to the guard captain, and 10 minutes later they were explaining their findings to him. Hizaki sat and thought about it. Well, I've heard stories about there being old tunnels under the daimyo's mansion and the surrounding city blocks that led out of the city. It was supposedly a series of escape tunnels that were built to get daimyo and his family out of the city in case of an attack. I don't know if those stories are true, but there are a bunch of old-looking metal doors in secluded parts of the city that could lead to the tunnels. Alright. Kiba pumped his fist in the air. Then let's go down there and kick their asses. No. Huh? They looked at Kurenai. What do you mean, sensei? Kurenai folded her arms across her chest. We shouldn't go rushing in just because we know where they are. Those tunnels are their turf, and there are probably traps set up, not to mention that they know the layout and we don't. Before we go down there, you'll need some more training if we're going to fight them down there. What kind of training? Naruto asked. Well, you need to learn to fight in the dark, to not hit your teammates, learn sign language like you were taught in the academy, fight in areas where you have restricted movement like you would in the tunnels, and you need to learn stealth. These enemies obviously know how to fight and can be dangerous. We can't wait too long or we'd risk another attack, so we'll go down at the end of the week. What if they leave by then? Ino asked. Kurenai shook her head. If no one has found them by now, then they probably think that they are safe where they are. They spent the rest of the night planning the training schedule before they had dinner and stumbled off to bed for a night's rest. The sloshing of disturbed water was the only sound that permeated the air as he moved. He was clad in a heavy black cloak with a hood shadowing his face as he made his way back to their base camp. These tunnels were old but sturdy and secluded and were perfect for their operations. He entered the chamber where they had set up their sleeping bags and laid out the maps to the city. It had only been a fluke that those two guards had managed to stumble on the place after following one of his colleagues into the tunnels. After he killed the guards, he went and killed the colleague that almost revealed them. Failure was something that would not be tolerated. He looked around the empty chamber. The others were up in the city attending to their own tasks. He spread one of the maps open on the table and swept his eyes over the plans to the daimyo's mansion again. They were supposed to wait in the tunnels and carry out tasks as they received them. The first task had been to steal important documents from the Greater Nain Bank, which they managed to carry out without a hitch. They left no traces and got the documents back to the camp safely. It was a couple of days after that when the guards found their camp. They were promptly killed and their bodies dumped in an alley in the city above. Their second task had been to sneak into the Grand Archive and steal an old scroll. The one carrying out the task managed to get in, but foolishly forgot to dry off the rain from his clothes and had alerted the guards to the break-in. He had punished the boy harshly for his failure, but didn't kill him, as they could not afford to let their numbers dwindle too far. They were expecting a new task any day now, and he hoped that it would arrive soon. It got rather boring in the tunnels, but he wouldn't move until he was told to. He rolled up the map and went to sit in front of the fire, pulling a high nutrient ration bar from his pocket as he stared into the flames. They had discovered that Yuhi Kurenai had entered the city with 3 genin a few days earlier. They couldn't get specifics on the genin, only that there were 2 blondes and an Inyazuka. There would be no problem if there was a fight, but Yuhi was a true danger. A former pupil of the Sannin Jiraiya, Yuhi Kurenai was known throughout the elemental nations for her powerful capabilities. She wasn't a powerhouse like her teammates Namikaze Minato or Uzumaki Kushina. Kurenai was one for smaller engagements and one-on-one fights. Even if all 5 of them fought her, they would have a fight on their hands. They just had to hope it wouldn't come to that. Although if it did come to it, then they could always use her genin against her. Emotions make you weak after all. Ino flopped down onto her futon with a groan. They had just gotten back from their second night of stealth training. They were planning to go down into the tunnels tomorrow afternoon, and already the nerves were getting to her. It would be her first ever real battle, and if those dead guards were any indication, the enemies they were facing weren't scared to get their hands bloody. That scared her more than anything. Over the past 2 months she had grown fond of Naruto and Kiba, she would even call them her friends, and the thought of them winding up like those 2 guards made her stomach twist uncomfortably. They had been taught since the academy that your team was like your family. They would watch your back, and you would watch theirs to make sure everybody got home safe. She knew that over time they would build the kind of connection one only had with those that you would entrust your life to without question. It was also interesting to see what boys other than Sasuke were like, not that she had eyes for anyone other than Sasuke, of course, she was just curious. Kiba was funny and could make her laugh at times. She also knew that he was a good fighter and was even better when he was with Akamaru after all the times she sparred with him. She was also astounded to see that he had a gentle side when it came to animals. Whenever Akamaru got injured, he would fuss over the little dog and help him as much as he could. When they had a mission at the Inyazuka veterinary practice, she watched as he helped his sister carefully tend to sick animals that were brought in, even the cats that he had always claimed to hate. They still argued occasionally, but it was more a battle of wits than before. Naruto though was the one that interested her the most. She talked to him a lot, but she felt that she hardly knew a thing about him. There was always this mystery to him that she couldn't figure out. Whenever she asked about his life before he came to the village, he always became uncomfortable and gave vague answers or tried to change the subject. Other than his avoidance of his past, she found him to be rather caring, smart, funny, and well, sweet. He was always kind to everyone he met, helped you if you needed it, and could brighten your day with his mere presence. There was also this air around him. One of power and authority, of warmth and compassion. She didn't know why, but she always felt safe around him and sometimes felt a strange fluttering in her chest when he looked at her. There were also the strange things that happened when they walked through the village. He was bewildered when he noticed a large group of civilian girls staring at him. When he asked them if anything was wrong, they broke out in a fit of giggles and blushed. He didn't know what the hell was going on, but he politely answered the questions they asked him. Was he a ninja? What age was he? Did he have a girlfriend? That question bothered Ino, and she broke in, reminding Naruto that they had training to get to. He seemed relieved to be able to get away from the group of girls and followed her to their training. He never understood the looks the girls gave him, but she did. They were the same ones that she and the other girls gave Sasuke. Ones of infatuation, adoration, and in some cases, lust. She didn't know why it bothered her. She could see that Naruto was attractive. His spiky blonde hair, those cute whisker marks, and his deep blue eyes made him stand out and gave him a strangely feral and exotic look. Throw in the muscles he developed from training and his personality, and you have a pretty good catch. She knew that she loved Sasuke. She was just looking out for Naruto. She didn't want him to get hurt or used by any of those girls, he was her friend. She was just looking after her teammate. Right. She rolled over and covered her head with her pillow. This was all so confusing. Why did she keep thinking about him? Why did the looks the other girls gave him make her angry? She sighed into her pillow and forced herself to clear her mind and get to sleep. She couldn't go into battle tomorrow if she was dead on her feet. It was late evening when Team Kurenai gathered around one of the rusted steel doors that lead down into the tunnels. The sun was low in the sky and sent orange rays of light across the dark purple heavens. They stood in an alley between the back gardens of 2 tenement buildings. They adjusted the communicators around their necks as Kurenai spread an old map out in front of them. The daimyo himself had provided them after they asked about the tunnels. He gave them to them under the promise not to reveal anything about the tunnel's existence to anyone. Okay. Kurenai said to get their attention. The tunnels have numerous exits and are built to confuse those that aren't familiar with their layout. There is only one place where the enemy could hole up. She pointed to a large circle in the center of the map. Here. It's a chamber in the middle of the tunnel system and the only place for a group of people to stay in the tunnels and fit the description Ino gave us from the dead guard's memory. There are 3 entrances to the chamber. Ino and I will take one entrance, Kiba and Naruto will take another, and Naruto will create cage bunchen to block the last one. To avoid being detected we'll maintain radio silence and use chakra to walk on the water until we attack. They probably have traps set up, so be on the lookout. Any questions? They shook their heads and Kurenai re-rolled the scroll and placed it into her vest pocket as she stood and turned to the door. She pulled out an old-looking key and inserted it into the hole before twisting it with a metallic click. Kurenai had to pull the rusted door open and it gave a loud screeching groan as the entrance to the tunnels was revealed. It was a set of metal handles sticking out of the wall that formed a ladder down into the passageways under the city. Kurenai went first and climbed down into the dark. She forced chakra into her eyes to help her vision in the sunless environment and landed on top of the water with hardly a ripple. She stepped away from the ladder and looked down the tunnel. The tunnels were wide enough to allow 3 grown men to walk side by side and about 4 meters tall. The floor was submerged under a good 3 inches of dirty water and the occasional rat could be seen swimming through it. She heard the others land behind her and she motioned for them to follow her. She led them down the tunnels towards the chamber where their enemies would be. After 5 minutes they came up to a junction and Kurenai held up a hand to stop them. She silently motioned for Naruto to create 2 cage bunchen. After the clones appeared the group split up, Naruto and Kiba down one tunnel, Kurenai and Ino down another, and the clones down another. Kurenai led Ino forwards, bypassing any wire traps she found. The traps were rather crude but effective. A wire ran between the walls and attached to 2 small containers filled with nails. When the wire was tripped it pulled a pin in the containers and the nails were fired out in a wide blast pattern. It was brutally effective. She finally noticed the faint light of a fire coming from up ahead and she motioned to Ino. They pressed themselves up against a wall and slowly began to slide towards the entrance to where their enemies were hiding. Kurenai stopped outside the entrance, just outside the beam of light caused by the fire, and peeked around the corner. The chamber was exactly the same as Ino described. The walls were the same scum-encrusted old stone as the rest of the tunnels, but the floor was devoid of water. There were 2 old tables sitting against one of the walls covered in scrolls and parchment. In another corner were a pile of sleeping bags and a few traveling packs. She glanced over at the other entrances and saw the vague shape of Naruto in the shadows, Kiba probably right behind him. She glanced at the other entrance and saw the clones were in position. And there, huddled around the fire, were the thieves and murderers they were after. There were 5 of them, clad in heavy black cloaks with hoods shrouding their faces in shadow. She couldn't see any weapons on them, but they could be concealed under the cloaks. She was about to motion for the others to move when she heard the cloaked figures speaking. "Do we know when we will be receiving a new task?" One of them asked, his voice a gravely monotone which sounded oddly muffled. "We should receive word any day now." Another more feminine voice answered. "There had better not be any more failures." A third voice warned, his tone folding the faintest trace of a threat. "The only potential problems I can think of would be caused by the team from Konoha." The first voice commented. "I don't think they will be a problem for much longer." The third voice responded mildly. His head shifted slightly to look over his shoulder. "What do you think of Kurenai-san?" Kurenai's eyes widened and she silently cursed. How did they know? She was sure they hadn't been seen. Could they have had some sort of sensor set up? "How did you know?" she asked conversely, as though she had only been mildly surprised that they had detected her. "You didn't hide your chakra signature. You may, as well, come out. You're genin too." Kurenai slowly pushed away from the wall and walked into the chamber, staying in front of Ino. These people seemed to be a lot more skilled than she first thought, and if that was true then they were a lot more dangerous. She saw Naruto and Kiba, as well as Naruto's 2 clones enter the chamber, kunai in their hands, and ready to attack at a moment's notice. "If you know who we are then you know why we are here," stated Kurenai. "You will be taken into custody for the murder of 2 Neian city guards and the suspected break-in of the Greater Neian Bank and the Grand Archive. Come quietly and you will live. Resist and we will be forced to use lethal force." She tensed as the group rose to their feet. "I'm afraid we can't allow that, Kurenai-san," the man said as he turned to her, his face still overshadowed. "We were ordered to remain here until told otherwise and we cannot go against orders." "And whose orders were that exactly?" Kurenai asked warily, not liking where this was going at all. "The true leader of Konohagakure," he said as he reached for his hood. "The true leader of Konoha?" Kurenai's eyes went wide. Could he be talking about the founder of Anbu and the architect of Konoha's future, Commander Danzo? He finished as he pulled back his hood. His face was covered by a porcelain rat mask, brown markings covering its white surface. Kurenai could only say one word. Brute. Naruto's eyes widened. What were Anbu doing here? Were they on a mission for the village? What is going to happen now? Naruto looked closely at the rat-masked Anbu. He didn't know why, but he could have sworn he knew him from somewhere. But that didn't make sense. Before today he'd never even seen Anbu, he'd only read about them. He glanced at Kurenai and his brow furrowed in confusion. He knew these were Konoha Anbu because they were the only ones to use animal masks. The other villages used different masks like demon masks for Kumo Anbu and the skull masks of Iowa. If these were their allies, then why was their sensei so nervous? Hiba apparently shared his confusion. Hey Kurenai sensei, what the hell is going on? He called over to her. The rat Anbu turned his head towards them and froze when he saw Naruto. So he was taken by Konoha. He murmured to himself. One of the other root ninja pulled away their hood, long twisted shiny black ponytail falling to the back of the ninja's knees, held together at the end by a circular golden clasp. The Anbu's green and white snake mask turned to look at Naruto. Fox. She spoke, her voice revealing her to be female. We have orders to eliminate you on sight. Naruto's face crunched up in confusion. Fox. Eliminate on sight. Ni-chan, what the hell is going on? Kurenai whipped out a kunai and fell into a ready stance. All of you listen. These are not Konoha ninja, they are traitors. Despite that they are still well trained, so exercise extreme caution. Rat turned his head back to Kurenai. We cannot let you leave here alive Kurenai-san, especially not Fox. He said, as the root ninja let their cloaks fall to the ground. Kurenai's critical eye examined the traitors. 3 of the enemy ninja, wearing dog, weasel and salamander masks, were clad in the typical Konoha Anbu armor, grey armored vests and forearm bracers over shoulder-length black gloves and form-fitting, sleeveless black turtlenecks. Black pants were taped from the knee down into black sandals and their ninja 2 swords strapped across their backs. The other 2 ninja were different. The rat-masked Anbu wore the old Mk3 armor. He wore a grey jounin vest underneath a thick armored vest with straps going over his shoulder. At the ends of the sleeves, instead of ending at the wrist, there were fingerless gloves covering the hands and a pair of grey forearm bracers wrapped around his lower arms. Instead of a ninja there was a pretty vicious looking hook and chain at his side, its metal surface gleaming in the light. The snake Anbu wore a variation of the Mk3 armor. A tight black sleeveless turtleneck dress that fell past her knees that was split high at the sides, showing a lot of her thighs, was under the grey jounin vest and chest armor with her kunai pouch strapped to her bare thigh. Her arms were clad in the shoulder-length gloves like the others, but lacked the bracers or the shoulder armor. Strapped across her lower back was a short sword and her feet were encased in a pair of knee-length black kunoichi sandals. Those 2 were going to be trouble, Kurenai could tell. Orders, sir? The dog-masked Anbu asked the rat-masked one. He turned to face Naruto and Kiba. Snake and Weasel engage Kurenai and the girl. Salamanders destroy those clones, then assist Snake and Weasel. Dog will engage Fox and the Inyazuka with me. Snake looked at Rat. Are you sure that is wise? Fox is extremely strong. Rat unhooked his hook and chain from his belt. He is still wearing his restraint collar. He won't be a threat. Kurenai grit her teeth. Naruto and Kiba couldn't take on a jounin yet, much less an Anbu. Her only hope was that they could stall long enough for her to get to them. Suddenly the Anbu sprung into action. Snake and Weasel launched themselves at Kurenai as the salamander masked one ran forward to engage the clones. Kurenai blocked the stab from Snake's sword as she kicked Weasel in the chest, sending him into the wall. Kurenai pulled out another kunai as she blocked a rain of lightning-fast slashes from the other kunoichi. Sparks flew from the metal as Kurenai managed to deflect the attacks. She used one kunai to push away the sword as she brought her fist down to crash into the side of Snake's head, sending her stumbling backwards. Kurenai grabbed Ino and leaped backwards into the tunnels, their relatively narrow passages allowing her to fight both Anbu more easily without having to worry about Ino. She just hoped Naruto and Kiba could hold out until she got there. Naruto used his trench knives to deflect Rat's hook and chain as Kiba and a transformed Akamaru leaped for the dog-masked Anbu. He created 2 clones to rush the ninja, but they were quickly destroyed by the long chain of Rat's weapons. The hook end of the weapon snapped out and wrapped around Naruto's throat as he clutched at it. Rat gave a quick yank and Naruto's head was parted from his shoulders. Right before he burst into smoke, the broken remains of a wooden stool in his place. Rat spun around and launched a hook across the chamber at Naruto, who had used a kawarimi to avoid decapitation. Naruto ducked the curved blade and tore across the ground towards Rat. When he was in range he drew his arm back, ready to bury his knife into the rogue Anbu's chest. Rat had other plans. His free hand snapped out, smashing into the side of Naruto's skull and sending him crashing through one of the tables. As if that wasn't bad enough, Naruto had just received the memories from one of his clones that the salamander Anbu had managed to destroy. He glanced over at where Kiba and Akamaru were fighting. The Inyazuka duo had managed to relieve the Anbu of his ninjutsu and were engaging in a rather vicious taijutsu fight. Even though it was 2 against 1, the dog-masked Anbu was gaining the upper hand. Naruto threw himself out of the way a second before Rat's hook and the chain crashed through the remains of the table. He took a moment to catch his breath. There weren't a lot of options for him in this fight. It was too cramped and slippery for Capoeira, and he couldn't use most of his without risking hitting Kiba and Akamaru or collapsing the tunnel down on them all. Damn his love of things that go boom. Naruto's eyes widened. There was one thing he could do. Rat took a swing at him, the hook of his weapon clutched in his hand. Naruto ducked under the blade and began to channel chakra through his hand. He managed to barely dodge a few more strikes before his glowing hand shot out and tapped Rat on the shoulder, causing his entire arm to go limp and drop his hook and chain. Not missing a beat, Naruto kicked the thing across the chamber, but paid for it when Rat's foot smashed into his stomach, knocking the air out of him and sending him flying backwards. Rat glanced down at his arm. It was numb from the shoulder down, and he couldn't move it an inch. Used Shaonin No to sever the nerves in my arm, he thought before he brought his hand to his shoulder, green healing chakra coating his palm. He held it there for a few moments, then let the green chakra die out, extinguishing the healing as he flexed his newly repaired limb. Naruto groggily looked up at the again fitting fit Anbu and felt dread pool into his chest. How the hell was he supposed to win? Kurenai ducked Snake's sword and savagely kicked Weasel behind the knee, sending the Anbu to the ground as she spun on her heel to deliver a chop to Snake's throat, which was skillfully blocked. Kurenai quickly grabbed the other woman's wrist and threw her over her shoulder, back towards Weasel, and moved to stand in front of Ino. She paused for a moment to catch her breath. Throughout the fight she had noticed something odd. That woman's Snake was Anbu level, as she should be, but Weasel had the skills of a mid-level Chunin. The only reasoning she had for this was that Danzo was forced to train new operatives after his escape from Konoha. Training ninja took a long time, even longer to get them to Anbu level. Danzo must only be using his real Anbu for important missions and as squad leaders. She thought. This brought a sliver of hope to her. If the other Anbu were not as skilled as she first thought, then there was more of a chance that she would get to Naruto and Kiba before something happened to them. She knew that Naruto could take one of the Chunin level ninja, maybe even 2 of them, but she had a feeling that Rad Anbu was as strong as Snake. Her musings were cut short as Weasel launched himself at her. She ducked under his punch and maneuvered around to his back before delivering a punch of her own, but the power behind the hit was reduced thanks to the rude agent's armor, but was enough to send him stumbling forward. Kurenai spun in time to block a stab from Snake. She tried to kick her in the stomach, but the traitor managed to block with her knees. The 2 kunoichi were deadlocked, each trying to overpower the other. Suddenly Kurenai heard a hair-raising shriek and she risked a glance over her shoulder to see Ino frantically dodging Weasel's attacks, but the young blonde was clumsy and uncoordinated and was losing badly. Anger flooded into Kurenai's veins and she turned to Snake. She stared into the thin, dark eye slits of the Anbu mask. She smirked before drawing her head back and slamming it into the Anbu's face, a little chakra coating her forehead to avoid concussion and pack a little extra punch. Snake's head snapped back and she was sent tumbling into the water as Kurenai turned to deal with the person attacking her student. Ino was backed into a corner, lying in the water conscious but wounded, cuts and blood marrying her skin and clothes as Weasel raised his sword to finish her off. In 2 long strides Kurenai was behind Weasel as she wrapped a hand around his wrist with more strength than one would expect from the elegant jounin. She drove her foot into the side of his knee, breaking it and sending him to the ground as she wrenched the sword out of his hand. She stared down at him for a moment, cold fury in her eyes before she raised one foot and brought it crashing down onto his throat, brutally snapping his neck. She heard movement behind her and she turned to see Snake slowly raise herself from the water, a crack now in the direct center of her porcelain mask. Kurenai rolled her shoulders and prepared to remove the last obstacle between her and her 2 students. What the hell are these guys? Kiba thought as he fought to catch his breath. He had been fighting the dog Anbu while Naruto tried to avoid the psycho with a hook and chain. He was worried when he saw the guy in the salamander mask destroy the last clone, but breathed a sigh of relief when Naruto created another batch that swarmed over the Anbu and left him lying in a pool of his own blood. If he wasn't dead he soon would be. The clones then split up, half going to help Naruto and the other half helping him. Kiba and his batch were squaring off against Dog, but the Anbu was managing to fight them on equal ground and hold them at bay. Naruto was not so fortunate. His clones were quickly dispatched and he was barely avoiding Rat's attacks, cut and tears covering his skin. He ducked a swipe of the Anbu's sword and backpedaled away as one of Naruto's clones took up the fight. Kiba took out some bandages to patch up a cut on his arm as he glanced over when Naruto and Rat were fighting. He hoped Kurenai-sensei would get there soon. Naruto might not last for much longer otherwise, he thought grimly. Naruto stumbled backwards away from Rat. He was covered by cut and blood and he was pretty sure he had a few broken ribs if the sharp pain in his chest was any indication. He looked up into the impassive face, or rather mask, of Rat. Besides the one time he managed to numb his arm, Naruto hadn't been able to land a decent hit on the damnable Anbu. He created more clones and sent them forward only to see them destroyed by a swipe of the hook and chain. He swiped his hand over his wrist seals and let loose a barrage of shuriken which Rat nimbly dodged before sending his hook shooting towards Naruto. The blonde dropped to the ground and rolled out of the way. Naruto rolled to his feet to see an extremely welcome sight. Snake was launched backwards out of one of the tunnels and landed awkwardly before rolling to her feet. Her battle dress was torn and bloody and her mask was cracked. She looked worse for the wear, but it was what came out of the tunnel next which lifted his spirits. Kurenai, a little bloody and bruised, leaped out of the shadows. She landed with cat-like grace and examined the scene in front of her. Kiba and a few of Naruto's clones were battling the dog-masked Anbu, while a very battered Naruto barely managed to stand in front of Rat. Her eyes were drawn back to Snake as the kunoichi slowly got to her feet. Kurenai tensed as she reached behind her back and drew her short sword. The blade was rather thick, 3 inches thick and 20 long. The crossguard was of a silver snake winding itself into the shape of an infinity symbol at the base of the blade. Kurenai wondered why she hadn't drawn it in the tunnels, as the weapon's small size would be ideal in the confines of the tunnel. She didn't have long to think about it before Snake threw herself at her. Kurenai was forced back. The short blade seemed to be an extension of the rogue Anbu, the silver edge blurring in and out of existence as Kurenai frantically dodged left and right in an attempt to avoid decapitation. One of Snake's swipes was way too short and would have obviously missed, but something told her to duck. That instinct saved her life. In mid-swipe the blade of the weapon separated into 8 sections connected by a long metal cable. The 20-inch long blade extended to 60 inches as it sliced over Kurenai's head, severing a few raven locks. The snake sword. The Jounin thought in confusion. Snake swords were very rare and very hard to master, she had only heard of 4 other users in the last century alone. She ducked another sweep of the elongated weapon and was forced back. The blade twirled around Snake like an elegant ribbon, the Anbu dancing within the confines of the deadly weapon as she attacked. Kurenai hissed as the blade caught her shoulder and she brought her hands together for A, but was interrupted by a light cut grazing her face. Snake twirled the sting of razor-edged blades around her before lashing out. Kurenai ducked one attack and turned to launch herself away when the worst possible thing happened. She slipped. Kurenai couldn't bit back the cry of agony as the sword cut into the back of her knees, cutting the tendons and dropping her into a crumpled heap on the wet floor, blood spilling from her wounds. Kurenai ni-chan. She heard Naruto's cry as Snake advanced on her, her sword once again short, and prepared to finish her. Naruto saw the blade of the snake kunoichi slice into Kurenai's legs and panicked. Kurenai ni-chan. He called, fear for his big sister flooding his veins as Snake slowly advanced on her, ready to finish the job. Rat took advantage of Naruto's distraction and viciously swung at him with the hook clutched in his hand. Naruto, in a fit of desperation, forced as much chakra into his legs as he could and launched himself backwards. He barely managed to avoid being dismembered but was still damaged. The cruel hook cut into the side of his neck and down his chest, tearing away the front of the mesh shirt and combat vest he wore as he launched himself backwards into the shadows of the tunnels. Immediately Rat focused his chakra into his arm and threw his hook into the shadows after the boy. He yanked the chain back in an attempt to hit Naruto with a backstroke but jerked in surprise when the chain pulled taut. He yanked at the chain again, but to no avail. He looked up when he heard slow measured steps make their way through the water towards him. From the darkness of the tunnels Naruto emerged, Rat's hook clutched firmly in one hand. The boy's eyes were empty, his face expressionless. It was a look that Rat had come to know and, despite his training, a look he had come to fear. He slowly let his gaze fall to the spot where the blonde child had been standing a few seconds before. There, lying amongst a few bloody rags, was a black collar, the thick leather sliced in half. Very slowly, almost, as if hoping that by not seeing it would make it not real, Rat looked up into the ice-cold shards that were the child's eyes, and he swallowed as he met the gaze of the one person he feared most. He felt a shiver run down his spine as a haunting monotone voice drifted from the boy's mouth. "Hello Rat," said Fox. "Thanks for watching my video and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description, see you next time, till then sayonara."